Chapter 327. The sun and the moon rose and fell. The black tide was turbulent and violent. Over Lonely Mountain, it was like a rainstorm that fell late at night but was illuminated by the sun and the moon at the same time. The heavy rain fell overwhelmingly. The surging sword intent was deep and dark, but it was clear and sharp under the light of the sun and the moon. Extreme light and darkness intertwined. Everything on Lonely Mountain was like a phenomenon of heaven and earth. Lin Fengting did not move. Wang Tianzong did not move. But the completely different sword intent kept spreading, and it kept surging in every corner of the entire Lonely Mountain. This was the confrontation and entanglement at the peak of martial arts. The broken reincarnation had completely disappeared. The black tide and the sun and the moon were all sword intent. There was no unique skill, but the purest and most violent sword intent. The black tide, the rainstorm, the cold moon, the scorching sun, they were all swords. The so-called light and darkness. The so-called phenomenon of heaven and earth. They were all swords. Li Tianlan stared at every scene of the flowing light in front of him. His body was trembling slightly, and a trace of excitement gradually appeared on his pale face. His body subconsciously took a few steps forward, and his eyes were even a little intoxicated. He could no longer see the light and darkness. There was only sword intent in his eyes. If the essence of the world was silence. If the peak of martial arts was illusion. In the silence and illusion, sword moves, sword energy, everything could not exist. In sword arts, only the purest sword intent and sword momentum were the only real. Li Tianlan's world was quiet, and his sight was all illusion. So the seemingly colorful but extremely pure sword intent became the most gorgeous and magnificent picture in his eyes. Li Tianlan sat down. If the peak of martial arts was illusion, it was meaningless to see it or not. He closed his eyes. In the blink of an eye, he directly entered the deepest level of meditation. The endless sword intent became clearer and clearer in his conscious perception. At this moment, he seemed to be touching the essence of the sword intent of the Wang family of Beihai and the Lin clan. The essence of sword intent. The sword intent of the 24 moves of sword was far greater than that of the Wang family of Beihai, and its light was like the sun and the moon. But the sun and the moon would also be silent, silent in the pure darkness. Any light that could dissipate in the darkness was illusion. Only darkness was real. Therefore, although the martial arts of the Wang family of Beihai was not as grand as the 24 moves of sword, it was far more real than the 24 moves of sword. Reality and illusion. This was the essence of the highest level of martial arts, surpassing the level of sword intent, the strength of defense, and all other basic essences. This was the first time Li Tianlan had seen the truth. Illusions could reach the end of martial arts. You can be real too. At this moment, Li Tianlan suddenly thought of deity he met in heaven capital. Thinking of his sword light that was as vast as the sun and moon, thinking of his truth that was as dark as eternity. He had touched upon the path of the strongest martial arts, but he could no longer reach the end. It was only at this moment that he vaguely understood the ambition of God. Wang Tianzong. Lin Fengting. Shen, every one of them had talent comparable to a genius. The world wouldn't exist just for one person. Everyone had the potential to become a true prodigy. Li Tianlan sat quietly. He seemed to have fallen into the deepest state of nirvana. The entanglement of the black tide and the sun and the moon seemed to be endless. Li Tianlan's figure began to disappear in the sword intent all over the mountains and plains. In a trance, he seemed to have completely left the lock of Wang Tianzong and Lin Fengting's sword intent. It was a great victory. It had been 3 years. Li Tianlan hadn't really shown his strength after his return, but his martial arts had taken half a step forward. This half step was very small. But it had an extraordinary meaning. At this moment, Li Tianlan sat there. His figure had never been blurred, but it had never been clearer. It was like heaven and earth. It was always the most real existence. But because it was too grand, it would always be subconsciously ignored. Wang Tianzong noticed Li Tianlan's change at the first time. Above the black tide, a sharp and cold snort sounded like thunder. In an instant, the black rain all over the sky stopped. The rain-like sword shadows all stopped around the light of the sun and the moon. The sword shadows began to gather wildly. The sword sea turned into a starry sky. The starry sky turned into a rainstorm. The rainstorm turned into a sword sea again. All the sounds on Lonely Mountain disappeared completely. The despairing silence began to spread, and only the sun and the moon remained the same. Looking from a distance, the sword sea was like a dark halo flowing around the sun and the moon, covering the entire Lonely Mountain. Li Tianlan didn't move. Lin Fengting's expression suddenly became extremely serious. Tianzong, do you have to do this? Lin Fengting said in a deep voice. The cause of the past is the effect of today. I have no choice. Wang Tianzong's voice was cold. In fact, cause and effect were no longer important. It didn't matter whether the Li family owed the Wang family of Beihai or not. Li Honghe might feel guilty to the Wang family of Beihai. But it would not change anything. Since there was no turning back, he could only make the best of the mistake. Right and wrong could not decide everything. After all, the enemy could only be the enemy. The endless sea of swords rippled for a moment. Countless sword shadows trembled. Around the light of the sun and the moon, the sword sea formed a wave. The wave did not spread outward. Instead, it collapsed inward. In a trance, there was a storm between heaven and earth in the huge tide. An indescribable storm swept through everything along with an earth-shattering boom. The darkness began to become more real than ever. The densely packed sword shadows became extremely crazy in an instant. The storm destroyed everything in the sword shadows. The monstrous black tide rushed towards the sun and the moon in the center without any hesitation. All the sword intent poured out in the most violent way in an instant. The sword sea was collapsing, and the sun and the moon were expanding. The entire Lonely Mountain was shaking and cracking in the extreme outbreak of sword intent. The light of the sun and the moon spread out to the limit. All the sounds disappeared completely in an instant. Only the storm and the tide were still the same. A dazzling white spot suddenly lit up in the center of the sun and the moon. In the silent world, the sun and the moon seemed to explode completely. The white spot suddenly became a dazzling light everywhere. The light swallowed the darkness. The darkness shattered the light. A void appeared in the sky where light and darkness intertwined. The void was formed and shattered. Light and darkness intertwined. The whole sky became mottled with black and white intertwined. In the absolute chaos, Lin Fengting seemed to move. He took a step forward. But the landing point was not in front of him, but directly appeared in the sky thousands of meters above. Wang Tianzong also moved. For the first time, there was a harsh sound of gold and iron colliding in the air. The two long swords seemed to have collided once, but no one could see it clearly. The mottled black and white sky surged and exploded. A blazing white halo appeared in the sky, and all the sword intent kept spreading out in the halo. The mountain collapsed and the earth cracked. This was a real mountain collapsed and the earth cracked. There was only light and darkness in the soaring sword intent, and nothing could be seen clearly. The violent sword intent finally began to dissipate. A large amount of smoke and dust spread after the sword intent, covering the field of vision. The smoke and dust gradually dissipated. Li Tianlan was still sitting. Li Tianlan stood in front of Li Honghe and Situ Cangyue. Everyone seemed to have changed their positions, but also seemed to have not changed. Only Wang Tianzong was still floating in the air, cold and majestic, like a god. Lonely Mountain, there was no Lonely Mountain anymore. The whole Lonely Mountain was cut to the ground by this sword. Everything that used to be completely disappeared and no longer existed. Only the Li family's cemetery remained after Lin Fengting's sword light. But only the cemetery was left. The whole Lonely Mountain seemed to have never existed. The ground of Lonely Mountain, which had become flat, was still cracking. Horrifying cracks appeared one after another on the wall. Wisps of white mist rose from the cracks. The mist appeared quickly. But it never condensed. All the mist seemed to have a master. As soon as it appeared, it began to gather toward Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan was surrounded by mist, and everything became blurred. 3 years ago, Great Master Wu Wei planted a flower. It was called the Dragon Vein Flower. That flower was the key to Li Tianlan's resurrection. The flower was picked, but its roots disappeared in Mount Qinyun and became the flourishing flowers and plants of the whole Lonely Mountain. Now that Lonely Mountain completely disappeared, the remaining lux suddenly turned into white mist again and began to gather toward Li Tianlan. Wang Tianzong watched all this quietly. His eyes narrowed tightly, and for the first time, there was a touch of undisguised fear and killing intent in his eyes. Now Li Tianlan was still weak. But his future was worthy of everyone's real attention. In Wang Tianzong's eyes, Li Tianlan was no longer a threat. He was an opponent. He was a real enemy. Wang Tianzong took a step forward in the air. One step was 100 meters, and he almost reached Li Tianlan. Do you want to make another sword move? Lin Fengting blocked Wang Tianzong's way forward. His face was a little pale, but his aura was still strong. In the final collision, although Lonely Mountain completely disappeared, the Li family still existed. The people of the Li family and the Li family's cemetery survived because they were shrouded by his sword intent. This was the first time that Lin Fengting had completely shown his attitude. When the Li family was destroyed, he didn't know. After the Li family was destroyed, everything was too late. After more than 20 years, Lin Fengting finally stood in front of the Li family. No right or wrong. The dark world didn't need right or wrong or understanding. Only cause and effect were the most real. Fengting, is this your attitude? Wang Tianzong looked into Lin Fengting's eyes. Yes. Lin Fengting said calmly. Is this also the attitude of the Lin clan? Wang Tianzong asked again. Lin Fengting narrowed his eyes. He didn't know the meaning of Wang Tianzong's words. This could be understood as a threat. It could also be understood as a simple inquiry. Lin Fengting suddenly smiled. If you really want to understand it in this way, it's not impossible. The Wang family of Beihai was indeed powerful. They deserved to be called the first force in the dark world. Although the headquarters of the Lin clan stood aloof from the world. But with the branches scattered all over the world, it was also a giant. Even if Lin Fengting could barely integrate the branches everywhere, there would be many internal problems. But there were also internal problems in the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Tianzong's pupils contracted, and he said in a deep voice, "Why? I have no choice." Lin Fengting shook his head. Wang Tianzong knew that he had asked a nonsense question. Since there was no choice, anything he said was nonsense. The famous sword of the Wang family of Beihai behind him, Listen to the Sea, shook slightly. The bright sword blade suddenly came out of the sheath. Lin Fengting suddenly raised his eyebrows. This peak invincible realm expert, who had always been playing in the world and seemed to live outside the mortal world, was always free and easy. But as he raised his eyebrows, there was a trace of indescribable sharpness in him. Do you want to fight again? Lin Fengting asked. You are no match for me. Wang Tianzong's tone was straightforward and calm. He was stronger than Lin Fengting. Whether it was much stronger or slightly stronger. Strength was strength. All the people of the Li family walked over quietly. In Wang Tianzong's eyes, they might be nonentities. But here, there was no room for them to retreat. The earth-shattering sword strike just now was enough to leave a huge shadow on them. But the nonentities in the shadow could also become warriors. Li Honghe, who was covered in blood, also came over. Situ Cangyue followed him. Wang Tianzong was still calm. It was a calmness of absolute confidence. The only purpose of his coming to Lin and today was to kill Li Honghe, and the feud with the Li family, and eliminate the threat that the Li family might bring to the Wang family of Beihai in the future. He had noticed that Gu Xingyun had withdrawn from the battlefield. But it didn't matter. Even if Lin Fengting stood in front of him at this time. But he could still kill Li Honghe. Why didn't he? Wang Tianzong narrowed his eyes and glanced at Li Tianlan, who was still sitting on the ground. The white mist had gradually thinned. Li Tianlan also opened his eyes at the same time. His eyes were calm and deep, and he looked at Wang Tianzong quietly. Wang Tianzong was motionless, as if he was thinking. Li Tianlan seemed to want to say something, but before he finished speaking, he spat out a mouthful of blood and dyed the dry land red. Wang Tianzong's pupils suddenly contracted. Li Tianlan reached out his hand and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He chuckled and said, "Comfortable. I still underestimated you." Wang Tianzong looked at Li Tianlan and said softly. His voice sounded like a sigh. His sword intent hurt Li Tianlan at the very beginning. But the blood just now was because Li Tianlan was watching his and Lin Fengting's sword intent and hurting his mind. It was not a serious problem. At least compared with the understanding he got, this kind of injury was much lighter. A young man in his early 20s could see the essence of the peak sword intent of swordsmanship. Wang Tianzong felt that he had underestimated Li Tianlan too much. The title of the heavenly son of Zhongzhou state did seem to be worthy of it. Wang Tianzong looked at Li Tianlan quietly. Li Tianlan saw the essence of the supreme swordsmanship. He also vaguely saw Li Tianlan's path. When did you recultivate the 4 realms of martial arts? Wang Tianzong suddenly asked. Li Tianlan's eyes slightly narrowed. 3 years ago. It only took 3 years? Wang Tianzong raised his eyebrows. It was 2 years. Li Tianlan said. Wang Tianzong's mouth twitched. The time is too short. The foundation is unstable. There is still time in the future. Li Tianlan's tone was calm. Wang Tianzong had nothing to say. He recultivated the 4 realms of martial arts in 2 years. Li Tianlan's foundation was indeed unstable. But Li Tianlan took the 4 realms of martial arts as the most basic foundation and starting point, directly jumped out of the 4 realms of martial arts and embarked on a new path. The 4 realms of martial arts were everyone's road to invincibility, but for Li Tianlan, they became the initial foundation. The foundation was unstable? Even if it was unstable, it was much more stable than others. Would you like to join the Wang family of Beihai? Wang Tianzong was silent for a while and then asked. He asked without changing his expression. The Wang family of Beihai has never owed the Li family anything. As long as you are willing to join the Wang family of Beihai, all the grievances can be written off, and I can give you the power to be on an equal footing with Xing Shao. Wang Tianzong's tone was calm and solemn. Li Honghe's face suddenly changed, and he said subconsciously, the Li family will not be anyone's vassal. His tone was a little fast, a little hasty, and even a little out of control. The Li family? Wang Tianzong twitched the corner of his mouth with a faint smile. He didn't look at Li Honghe, but at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan was looking at his grandfather who was covered in blood. He slowly walked to Li Honghe's side, held the old man who was shaking a little, and whispered, "The blood can't be shed in vain." That was his answer. Wang Tianzong's eyes flashed. Lin Fengting, Li Honghe, Situ Cangyue, plus more than a dozen elites from the Li family. And Li Tianlan. Wang Tianzong kept calculating in his heart. He couldn't kill Lin Fengting. He didn't want to kill him. But if he wanted to kill others, Lin Fengting might not be able to stop him. The premise was that he was willing to pay the price. The price might be heavy. But compared with the Li family, which was more important? The temperature in Wang Tianzong's eyes gradually decreased, and he began to become determined. You refused me again. Wang Tianzong looked at Li Tianlan. I'm just telling a fact. Li Tianlan said, until now, I've determined my future path, or the path of the East Emperor Palace. He looked at Wang Tianzong. He suddenly smiled and said, Your Majesty, after the maneuver, the East Emperor Palace will go to Wuyue to develop. How about that? Wuyue Province. The stability of the Southeast Group was second only to Beihai Province. That was the absolute base camp of Beihai Province, the real back garden. It seemed that the East Emperor Palace was courting death by going to Wuyue. But Wang Tianzong's calm face twisted in an instant. This was a declaration of war. Li Tianlan declared war on the Wang family of Beihai. Moreover, the location he had chosen was so subtle. Are you going to Wuyue? Wang Tianzong asked. How about it? Li Tianlan's tone was calm. No. Before Wang Tianzong could speak, a young and cold female voice suddenly sounded. A white figure walked up the lonely mountain, which had become a piece of flat land. Chapter 328. Li Tianlan instinctively looked in the direction of the sound. The sword intent on the flattened lonely mountain dissipated, but some sword energy still remained. The broken and out-of-control sword intent filled every corner of the surroundings bit by bit. The night was slightly turbulent, and the starlight fell. Everything in sight was a little blurred in the faint light. In his sight, the long white dress gently fluttered in the night breeze, with a delicate fragrance that Li Tianlan was familiar with but almost forgotten. In a trance, this picture was as beautiful as the most beautiful dream. Li Tianlan froze in place. His heart beat wildly, and his mind was blank. He stared at the figure getting closer and closer to him. Qin Weibai. Li Tianlan had imagined the scene of the two meeting again many times. But in any case, he did not expect that when he was most unprepared, she would appear in front of him so suddenly and naturally. His body was stiff, and the corners of his mouth trembled slightly, but he could not say a word. The residual broken sword energy all over the sky was still a scenery in his eyes. And the slim white figure walked in the residual sword intent, but it seemed that all the scenery was completely lit up in an instant. Qin Weibai was still so simple, but so perfect. Her long hair was tied up, and a green emerald hairpin was inserted in her hair casually. It swayed with her hurried footsteps, with intoxicating brilliance. Lonely Mountain, which had been razed to the ground by a sword, was desolate and dilapidated. The sword energy drifted around casually. The bare and almost dead land did not hide her charm at all. Instead, it made her look more dreamy and dazzling. She walked to Li Tianlan. Everything became clear. A clear face. A clear delicate fragrance. She looked at Li Tianlan. It was a beauty and gentleness that could topple the night sky and make the stars dim. Her eyes were still a little eager, but she always paid attention to her tone. You can't go to Wuyue, she said softly, not forcefully, but with a kind of softness similar to coquettishness. Li Tianlan looked at Qin Weibai motionlessly. It had been 3 years since the final battle of Heaven Capital. He had never seen her again, nor had he heard from her. It was just like when she walked into his world quietly and left without saying a word. Li Tianlan felt that he could only accept everything she did. He could not refuse her approach, nor could he stop her from going away. He could only accept it. Li Tianlan took a deep breath and looked at Qin Weibai, who appeared in front of him again. She was so close. She was so close that as long as he reached out, he would be able to pull her into his arms. She told him not to go to Wuyue. The corners of Li Tianlan's mouth moved. His voice became extremely dry, emotionless, and even devoid of warmth. Why? He asked. Qin Weibai's face suddenly turned pale. Wang Tianzong and Lin Fengting raised their eyebrows at the same time. What Li Tianlan asked was why. Not why. It was a difference of one word, but it was two completely different emotions. I don't want you to go to Wuyue, Qin Weibai whispered. Li Tianlan smiled. You don't want to, he recalled everything about him and Qin Weibai. She wanted to walk into her own world, so she became her own woman. She wanted him to enter Sai City, so she became the young governor of Sai City. She wanted to distance herself from him. As a result, the several heavenly kings of Samsara in Tiandu quietly disappeared before the decisive battle. After the decisive battle, she didn't want to have the slightest connection with his future, so she completely cut off all connections between him and her. Now she appeared in front of him again and said that she didn't want him to go to Wuyue. She expressed what she wanted or didn't want in the most direct way, which was sometimes gentle, but sometimes so cruel. Li Tianlan suddenly found himself so powerless. He couldn't resist Qin Weibai's gentleness, nor could he stop her cruelty. He didn't like this feeling. This feeling of being controlled, approached, and abandoned, from beginning to end. He never had the feeling of being in charge. He didn't understand Qin Weibai's choice every time. But he really cared about her too much. The more he cared about her, the more dissatisfied he was. Li Tianlan's heart gradually became quiet. He felt that his body began to cool down inch by inch from his fingertips. His limbs, torso, heart, and even his voice became extremely cold. "Who are you?" He looked at Qin Weibai and asked. This sentence was like an extremely sharp knife, cutting open his chest in an instant and leaving a bloody scar on his heart. It hurt, but it was almost twisted with pleasure. "My future has nothing to do with you. Then when you stand in front of me, who are you? Who are you?" Qin Weibai's face suddenly lost all the blood. Li Tianlan turned directly, looked at Wang Tianzong, and said word by word, "I will go to Wuyue after the maneuver." "No." The pale Qin Weibai said again, "You can't go to Wuyue. You will die." "Who are you?" Li Tianlan didn't look back and asked the same question. This cruel question seemed to be dripping blood. "I'm your wife. I won't let you go to Wuyue. You can't go." Qin Weibai bit her lip and took a step forward, directly hugging Li Tianlan from behind. "Don't be angry with me, okay? I won't allow you to go to Wuyue, please." She pulled Li Tianlan hard with her small hands, as if she wanted to turn his body around. "Hug me, I won't make you angry in the future." Li Tianlan's body trembled slightly. He tried to maintain his inner anger and resentment, but the delicate fragrance around him seemed to have magic power. It completely destroyed all his reason, his anger, his confusion, and his determination in the first place. Everything became no resistance in front of Qin Weibai. Li Tianlan suddenly turned around and held Qin Weibai in his arms. Completely ignoring other people's gazes, he held Qin Weibai's small face and kissed her directly. Qin Weibai's body stiffened for a moment, then she obediently reached out and put her arms around his neck, responding carefully. A blush as bright as the morning glow quietly climbed up her face. Li Tianlan's unconscious movement messed up her long hair that was tied up. The turquoise hairpin slipped out of her hair and fell on the dry land. Wang Tianzong, Lin Fengting, Li Honghe, and Situ Cangyue, the four people's eyes almost followed the turquoise hairpin from top to bottom. The hairpin rolled on the ground. As Li Tianlan moved forward, Qin Weibai raised a small foot and directly stepped on the hairpin. The corners of the four invincible realm experts' mouths twitched at the same time. Lin Fengting coughed dryly. Qin Weibai, who finally realized that the occasion was not right, gently pushed Li Tianlan, tilted her head, and whispered, "Wait for the night. It's night now." Li Tianlan's voice was rough. Qin Weibai gently raised her eyebrows and glanced at Li Tianlan. Her cheeks were red, and she said with a faint smile, "Yes, what do you want to do?" The question was so direct that Li Tianlan suddenly held back all his movements. He took a deep look at Qin Weibai, took a deep breath, and did not speak. Qin Weibai lay in Li Tianlan's arms and whispered, "You're not angry anymore, are you?" Li Tianlan snorted coldly and remained silent. "Then am I your wife?" Qin Weibai asked again. "What do you think?" Li Tianlan glared at her. "Are you done making out?" Wang Tianzong's voice sounded at an inappropriate time. Li Tianlan was suddenly shocked, and his heart fluctuated violently. Holding Qin Weibai, he ignored Wang Tianzong for a moment. Qin Weibai turned to look at Wang Tianzong in Li Tianlan's arms. She gently squatted down and picked up the turquoise hairpin on the ground. The hairpin fell to the ground and was stepped on. After picking it up, it was still free of dust and had a soft green luster. Qin Weibai casually tidied her long hair and put the hairpin back on her head. Her movements were elegant and soft, and her aura gradually changed. In a short period of time, she seemed to change from the little woman in Li Tianlan's arms to the number 2 figure of Samsara Palace. What are you still doing here? Qin Weibai looked at Wang Tianzong and said in a flat tone. A strong killing intent suddenly flashed through Wang Tianzong's eyes. Qin Weibai asked him what he was still doing here. The other meaning of this sentence was that there was nothing he could do here. Wang Tianzong looked at Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai was still held in Li Tianlan's arms. But she was no longer the little woman who was nervous and a little careful just now. Qin Weibai in Li Tianlan's arms was as strong and cold as a queen at this moment. Wang Tianzong looked at the turquoise hairpin in Qin Weibai's hair. The green light of the hairpin swayed. It carried a faint but extremely clear glow. Wang Tianzong took a deep breath. If there were only Lin Fengting and Situ Cangyue, he still dared to gamble and take action. At most, he would pay a heavy price. But at this time, there was Qin Weibai. Everything was unpredictable. Qin Weibai was here. The power of Samsara had come near Lonely Mountain. Qin Weibai came. What about the master of Samsara Palace? Even if the master of Samsara Palace did not take action, Qin Weibai would at least have a top combat capability that could not be ignored. Even if all this could be ignored, Li Tianlan could also exert the power of this turquoise hairpin. The hairpin on Qin Weibai's head seemed to be just an ornament. But it was a murderous weapon belonging to Samsara Palace. Blue Sky Underworld. Blue Sky Underworld fired in Europe 3 years ago. In 3 years, even with the intelligence of the Wang family of Beihai, it was not sure whether Blue Sky Underworld had the energy to fire again. The murderous weapon was the weapon of the nation. The energy storage time of the 12 murderous weapons was the most important secret. If Blue Sky Underworld could fire again, the power of one blow was enough to break the balance in the field. How is Gu Xingyun? Wang Tianzong suddenly glanced at Situ Cangyue and asked. He felt the battle between Gu Xingyun and Situ Cangyue and heard the roar of the setting sun over West Lake. The weapon of the nation was aimed at the god of war of his country. After this battle, Situ Cangyue made her position clear, but Sai City also had to pay the price. I don't know. It's best if he dies, Situ Cangyue said in a flat tone. Gu Xingyun had just returned from Star State and was already injured. Now he was hit by setting sun head-on. He was lucky not to die. At least he couldn't help Wang Tianzong tonight. Wang Tianzong smiled and said coldly, if Gu Xingyun doesn't die, what price will Sai City pay? Have you thought about it? What about you? Situ Cangyue asked calmly, you came to Lin and tonight but didn't succeed. What price will the Wang family of Beihai pay? Have you thought about it? Wang Tianzong's eyes narrowed, but he did not say much. His figure gradually faded in the ruined Lonely Mountain, and finally disappeared completely. Sword Emperor's last glance fell on Li Tianlan. His voice echoed in the night sky, plain and clear. East Emperor Palace goes to Wiyue. The Wang family of Beihai welcomes you very much. It depends on whether you dare to come or not. Qin Weibai in Li Tianlan's arms suddenly tightened and looked at Li Tianlan nervously. Li Tianlan did not respond. He just let go of Qin Weibai and bowed deeply to Lin Fengting. Thank you, senior. He bowed to Situ Cangyue again and said respectfully, thank you, Governor. Qin Weibai stood beside Li Tianlan and bowed to the two with him. Lin Fengting calmly accepted their bows. Chapter 329. In the latter half of the night, Qin Weibai took everyone to a villa area near West Lake. The villa was bought by Qin Weibai a few years ago. As the adopted daughter of Great Master Wu Wei, Qin Weibai often came to Lin and to visit him when he was alive. This villa was her temporary resting place. The villa was not far from Lonely Mountain. When Lonely Mountain was still there, people with good eyesight could even clearly see the lights in the villa from the highest point. Now that Lonely Mountain had collapsed under the sword of Lin Fengting and Wang Tianzong, this villa had temporarily become a place for the Li family to stay. The villa was large and in a good location. The fragrance of flowers was overflowing, and the landscape could be seen. Flaming Fire, who came to Lin and with Qin Weibai, arranged rooms for the remaining elites of the Li family, while Qin Weibai accompanied Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan paid attention to Li Honghe's condition. Li Honghe changed his clothes, but refused to let anyone check his injury. He looked no different from the grandfather in Li Tianlan's memory, but he was very different from the Li Honghe Li Tianlan saw at dusk. There was no difference between him and Li Honghe 3 years ago. There was no difference between him and Li Honghe before the battle tonight. Li Honghe's body was no longer stooped. His body was straight and his hair was gray, but his spirit was extremely strong. He stood quietly in front of the window and looked at West Lake shrouded in moonlight in the night. He seemed to be much younger all of a sudden, giving people a very tall and straight feeling. The more beautiful the surface was, the more fragile the inside was. The worry in Li Tianlan's eyes grew stronger. "I'm fine." Noticing his grandson's gaze, Li Honghe smiled and said slowly, "You know my state. For me now, the injury is not important. As long as I'm alive, I'll be fine." Li Tianlan walked to Li Honghe's side and looked at his still ruddy and even glowing face. "How is it?" Li Tianlan asked seriously. "It's fine." Li Honghe was silent for a moment and gave a simple answer. "What about the specifics?" Li Tianlan pursued him relentlessly. "Tianzong's sword completely shattered the foundation of my martial arts, but at the same time, it also shattered the sword intent that I had accumulated for countless years. My foundation is completely loose, and when my body loses balance, my strength will grow faster and faster. But now I almost have no sword intent, so even if my strength grows very fast, it will not burst my body for the time being. I still have some time to live." Li Honghe laughed at himself and said, "In this case, maybe I will live a little longer than before. It's not a bad thing that I can live." Li Tianlan was silent and didn't seem to know what to say for a moment. "I'm afraid I won't be able to help you much in the future." Li Honghe looked at Li Tianlan and said with a smile, "But I'm relieved that you have Qin Weibai by your side. Even if I die now, I won't have anything to worry about. Tianlan, I've left you a gift both inside and outside Zhongzhou State. This is the last thing I can do for you." "What gift?" Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. "After your maneuver is over, you will slowly get in touch with it," Li Honghe said softly. He took a deep look at Li Tianlan and patted him on the shoulder. "I feel guilty to you, so when you get the gift, you don't have to thank me." He looked in the direction of Lonely Mountain. Lonely Mountain had disappeared. The old man shook his head. "It's a pity for Lonely Mountain. Lonely Mountain will be rebuilt," Li Tianlan said softly. Li Honghe said yes with a smile and suddenly asked, "Do you still hate the Wang family of Beihai?" Li Tianlan was stunned. "I don't," he said softly. "In fact, I have never hated the Wang family of Beihai. I don't even hate Kunlun City. This is the truth. I don't think they did anything wrong. To the Wang family of Beihai, to Wang Tianzong. He really didn't feel bad. He admired Wang Tianzong's strength, respected his bearing, feared his strength, and sighed with the foundation of the Wang family of Beihai. Only occasionally, he would think of the Wang family of Beihai's indifference. The Wang family of Beihai did not stand idly by. It was the Li family who took the lead in peeping at the Wang family of Beihai. But it didn't matter. All the affection and all the grievances were settled with the battle of Li Kuangtu's treason. No matter how affectionate and righteous the Wang family of Beihai was, in Li Tianlan's current position, they were opponents and enemies. Li Tianlan didn't want to judge their good or bad, because it didn't make any sense at all. If he were Wang Tianzong, he would have made the same choice. If he were Gu Xingyun, he would have also set off the treason war on the border. But he was Li Tianlan now, so he must consider the problem from the standpoint of the Li family. There was no absolute right or wrong, only different positions. That was all. They are not wrong, and neither are we. Li Tianlan said softly, since we are enemies, let's be pure and not talk about grievances. Li Honghe nodded and said quietly, that's good. Both the Li family and the Wang family could not turn back. After tonight, even if there were grievances, they would be written off. When summer solstice smashed the Li family's murderous weapon, Infinite Sky, her martial arts foundation was broken by Li Kuangtu and she fell from the invincible realm. Tonight, Wang Tianzong returned Li Honghe's sword and also broke his foundation, making him fall from the invincible realm. Lin Fengting saved the Li family, but he did not stop Wang Tianzong from ending the last cause and effect between the Wang family and the Li family. After tonight, the debt between them would truly be cleared. Qin Weibai and Situ Cangnyue were together. In the spacious bedroom, the hidden god of Zhongzhou State's clothes were almost all undone, and she was lying on the bed almost naked. However, such a charming scene was not erotic, but a little shocking. Situ Cangnyue was slowly bleeding all over her body. The tiny blood vessels almost completely dyed her white and tight skin, although she was no longer young. At first glance, Situ Cangnyue's body seemed to be entangled with countless red threads. Qin Weibai took a towel to deal with the wounds on Situ Cangnyue's body, and at the same time, applied the powder little by little. Situ Cangnyue's body was covered with small wounds. The wounds were not deep, but there were a lot of them. Now, as the powder was applied, some of the small wounds began to heal gradually. Flaming Fire was arranging rooms and preparing food for the people of the Li family. Only Qin Weibai could clean Situ Cangnyue's wounds. They are all skin wounds. It's not a big problem. Qin Weibai wiped the blood off Situ Cangnyue's body and said casually, how about the internal injury? Fortunately, it's not too serious. Situ Cangnyue said softly. In the divine list, which determined the ranking by strength, Situ Cangnyue's ranking was far inferior to Gu Xingyun's. If Setting Sun hadn't opened fire without warning, she would never have been Gu Xingyun's opponent. But Setting Sun's blow directly wiped out the huge gap between the two sides' combat strength. Gu Xingyun fought her head-on under the power of Setting Sun, but it was not a big deal for Situ Cangnyue. No matter how big the gap between her and Gu Xingyun was, she was not so weak that she could not even take one blow from him. Although she had suffered some internal injuries, they were not even minor injuries to her. Situ Cangnyue raised her palm and quietly observed the ring worn on her finger. Her hand was slender, white, and tender, and crystal clear. The purple ring on her finger had a natural feeling, as if this ring was born to belong to this pair of hands. Situ Cangnyue looked at it quietly, with a complicated look in her eyes. Reluctant to give it up? Qin Weibai asked without raising her head. This is the murderous weapon Setting Sunday. If it were you, would you be willing to give it up? Situ Cangnyue asked in reply. It's a murderous weapon that can't be fired. Qin Weibai said calmly, a murderous weapon that can't be used as scrap iron. Even if it's used as a cold weapon to fight, it's normal. Why not? Situ Cangnyue was silent. A murderous weapon that couldn't be fired was indeed scrap iron. But the question was how many people in the dark world could see this problem so open-minded? Situ Cangnyue had Setting Sun in her hand. Even if she was ranked at the bottom of the divine list, when Setting Sun could fire, she would not be afraid of the giants at the top of the divine list. For an invincible realm expert, a murderous weapon meant an absolute huge improvement in combat strength. How is Gu Xingyun's injury? After dealing with Situ Cangnyue's injury, Qin Weibai asked in a low voice. Situ Cangnyue put on her clothes silently and thought carefully. She knew Qin Weibai's plan. So she also knew the importance of this problem. He should not die. Situ Cangnyue said, but I'm not sure if Gu Xingyun can stay in the invincible realm. But even if he can stabilize his realm, it will take a long time to stabilize his injury. This is the best result. It's indeed the best result. Qin Weibai was silent for a while and whispered, in that case, there's no need to be reluctant. Even if setting sun is given to Kunlun City, so what? It won't be long before Tianlan gets it back. Situ Tsangyue was still reluctant, but she still nodded. The moment setting sun fired and the purple light burst, Situ Tsangyue already knew the result. Tonight's battle was a conflict in the dark world and also a grudge between the superpowers. But in the end, this was Zhongzhou State. The Wang family of Beihai, the Li family, Kunlun City, Sai City. It was not an exaggeration to say that this battle was an internal strife in Zhongzhou State. The dark world and the special warfare system were just a part of Zhongzhou State. In this world, individual strength was important, but it was definitely not everything. Even someone as strong as Wang Tianzong could not sweep the world alone. He also needed to consider political factors, economic factors, stability, balance and compromise. Situ Tsangyue and Sai City needed to consider these more. Sai City had not entered the secular world before. But as soon as it entered the secular world, it directly used the murderous weapon of Zhongzhou State to aim at the god of war, the protector of Zhongzhou State. This matter could not be concealed. It was believed that before dawn, the high-level officials of Zhongzhou State would express their anger one after another. At this point, even the academics, who had a good relationship with Sai City, would not speak for Sai City. The murderous weapon of the state was aimed at its own people. For such a violation of the rules, Sai City had to give everyone an explanation, and also an explanation that could satisfy Kunlun City. Setting Sun was bound to change owners. This was the most basic thing. No matter how reluctant Situ Tsangyue was, she had to hand over the murderous weapon that had followed her for many years to Kunlun City to appease their anger. A murderous weapon was not even enough. Sai City had occupied the pattern of the dark world in the northeast of Zhongzhou State for many years, and it would also be strongly impacted by Kunlun City. From the moment the murderous weapon opened fire, this was a necessary compromise. It was also part of Qin Weibai's plan. How's the state of setting sun? Qin Weibai asked softly. I've stimulated the energy of setting sun to the greatest extent. It will take at least 3 to 4 years for setting sun to store energy again. Situ Tsangyue said calmly. Qin Weibai nodded. After the battle, Gu Xingyun was seriously injured. Kunlun City had one more murderous weapon and expanded its sphere of influence to the northeast. Kunlun City seemed to have greatly increased in strength, but they needed time to digest it. At least before Gu Xingyun recovered from his injury, a murderous weapon that could not fire could not increase the strength of Kunlun City. On the contrary, it would make them weak. In the case that their comprehensive strength was far inferior to the other party, the only thing Qin Weibai and Sai City could do was to sacrifice their existing resources, secretly and quietly exchange some things to protect their core interests. After this battle, Sai City would lose the murderous weapon and even lose the right to speak in the special warfare system of 1 or 2 provinces in the northeast. After paying these prices, the core interest they needed to protect was undoubtedly Li Tianlan. There were gains and losses. Everything is temporary. Qin Weibai looked at Situ Tsangyue and said. Situ Tsangyue nodded and suddenly asked, what did the Wang family of Beihai say? Li Honghe was the former god of war of Zhongzhou State. Although Li Guangtu's treason had dimmed the glory of the Li family, Li Honghe was still one of the veterans of Zhongzhou State and had a highly respected status. Situ Tsangyue should not have aimed the murderous weapon at Gu Xingyun. But Wang Tianzong should not have taken the initiative to attack the former god of war of Zhongzhou State. If Li Honghe had died tonight, everything would be out of the question. But now Li Honghe was alive. It was believed that many people in Zhongzhou State had something to say. The Southeast group must also pay the price for what Wang Tianzong did tonight. The Li family was bound to get compensation. That was the rule. Everyone was abiding by the rule. I don't know. I'll listen to Tianlan. He can get whatever he wants. Qin Weibai smiled and said, "Now, our distinguished guests should be on their way." "You did all this for him." Situ Tsanyue looked at Qin Weibai with complicated eyes. "Is it worth it?" She paused and continued to ask, "Have you ever regretted it?" Qin Weibai's body stiffened for a moment. "No, it's worth it," she whispered, but her tone was full of firmness. After tonight, the plan that had been planned for many years would begin, and everything would be irreversible. Li Tianlan's East Emperor Palace would gradually be perfected and eventually form a real prototype after the maneuver. It was not until this moment that Qin Weibai was sure that she had really done everything she could do. All of it. She created a paradise for the man she loved most. At the same time, she created a hell for herself. Qin Weibai suddenly smiled and asked softly, "Have you ever regretted falling in love with Li Guangtu?" Situ Tsanyue froze for a moment and looked at Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai's eyes were quiet and deep. Situ Tsanyue shook her head and said, "No." This was respect for his feelings, and also respect for himself. Even if Li Guangtu really committed treason. Even if Li Guangtu was really heinous. But for anyone, no matter what the nature of the person he fell in love with, no matter what happened later, as long as he loved, there was no need to regret. Just because he loved. When Qin Weibai went downstairs and returned to the living room, Li Honghe had already gone upstairs to rest. Li Tianlan was still sitting in the hall. Lin Fengting, who had left soon after arriving at the villa, reappeared in the hall. Beside him sat a handsome young man with almost the same temperament as him. The three were chatting casually. Qin Weibai went downstairs quietly and came to Li Tianlan's side. Lin Fengting glanced at her and said with a smile, "Boss Qin, let me introduce you. This is my son, Lin Yuxian. You are all young people. You should support each other in the future. Yuxian, this is Qin Weibai, Boss Qin. Call her sister." Lin Yuxian came to Lin and with Lin Fengting. Lin Fengting arrived at Lonely Mountain first. Lin Yuxian did not catch up with the last earth-shattering sword, but was brought here by Lin Fengting. Lin Yuxian stood up with a smile and looked at Qin Weibai. He lost his composure for a moment and then calmed down again. However, he did not dare to take the initiative to reach out. He just scratched his head and said with a smile, "Sister Qin, I am Lin Yuxian." "What Sister Qin?" "Call me sister." Lin Fengting frowned. Lin Yuxian looked at his father strangely and then said with a wry smile, "Sister." Qin Weibai nodded with a smile. She took Li Tianlan's arm and sat beside him. She chuckled and said, "This is my husband. You should all know him." A playful smile flashed across Lin Fengting's mouth. Lin Yuxian immediately understood what Qin Weibai's unnecessary introduction meant. He looked at Li Tianlan and felt a little embarrassed. He called Qin Weibai sister. What was his sister's husband? This boy. When they met for the first time, he called him Brother Lin. Li Tianlan was also a little embarrassed. He quietly glared at Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai smiled and was as beautiful as a flower. Li Tianlan just wanted to speak, but Lin Yuxian had already taken the initiative to speak. He reached out his hand as formally as they had just met for the first time. "Brother-in-law, hello." "Brother Lin, you are too polite." Li Tianlan held Lin Yuxian's hand and said with a wry smile, "We'd better call each other separately. You are older than me, brother-in-law is brother-in-law, not according to your age." Lin Fengting interrupted Li Tianlan's words. "Don't take advantage of me. That's it." Qin Weibai looked at Lin Fengting meaningfully and said with a chuckle, "I didn't prepare a greeting gift in advance. Yuxian's call of sister and brother-in-law is a little unfair. We are family. Don't care about this." Lin Fengting said softly. Qin Weibai took a deep look at him. She seemed to think of something and nodded. "Little Bai, why don't you let Tianlan go to Wuyue to develop?" Lin Fengting casually changed the way he addressed Qin Weibai and asked naturally. Li Tianlan turned his head subconsciously and glanced at Qin Weibai. Wuyue, Qin Weibai's expression was calm. She whispered, "The water is too deep. As far as I know, Wuyue is more suitable for Tianlan's development now. Although it is the territory of the Wang family of Beihai, the Wang family of Beihai is now very complicated. If he is careful, Tianlan may be able to create his own foundation in Wuyue." Lin Fengting said quietly, "The current leader of Wuyue is Wang Qinglei. He is a character. Even if there is a foundation, it is fake, at least not stable." Qin Weibai shook her head and looked at Li Tianlan. "The foundation of East Emperor Palace should be in the south," she said softly. "The south?" Li Tianlan repeated the words. Qin Weibai nodded. "The southernmost." She held Li Tianlan's hand and said softly, "There will be a chance soon. It is the most suitable for you to go to the south." In the southernmost south, she had prepared everything for Li Tianlan. As long as there was a chance, it would become Li Tianlan's path to heaven. Qin Weibai was even ready for the opportunity. The southernmost part of Zhongzhou State. It was not Nanyuan Province. It was Tiannan in the south of Nanyuan. It was nearly 40,000 square kilometers, nominally belonging to Annan State, but now actually under the control of Zhongzhou State. For Li Tianlan. Chapter 330. Tiannan was heaven. Heaven was now spread on the tea table made of white marble. Lin Fengting and his son had gone upstairs to rest. Qin Weibai accompanied Li Tianlan to study the map of Tiannan. This was an extremely detailed and exquisite map. The topographical features of the 35,000 square kilometers of Tiannan were clearly displayed on it. Li Tianlan looked at the map. Qin Weibai's delicate fragrance drifted over. Smelling this fragrance, Li Tianlan's heart was more focused and calm. "Why here?" Li Tianlan asked. "This is the most suitable place." Qin Weibai made a cup of tea for Li Tianlan and said softly. Li Tianlan took the teacup and said nothing, just quietly looking at the map of Tiannan in front of him. Tiannan was just a name for Zhongzhou State. And it was a private name for a few people standing in the upper class of Zhongzhou State. In fact, Annan State had never given up the fight for ownership of this territory. On the map, Tiannan was an irregular rectangle. This area, which was equivalent to 1/10 of the territory of Annan State, was extremely rich in terrain, including mountains, jungles, plains, and wetlands. There were 3 cities and more than 30 towns in Tiannan province, as well as some natural resources, which were not many but could not be ignored. For Zhongzhou State, since it had occupied this place, it could not give it up. Tiannan had now become a must-fight place for Zhongzhou State. And the must-fight place for Zhongzhou State. In Annan State, it must be protected. If it were not for the inexplicable war between the superpowers in the Dark World, today's Tiannan should have been the focus of all kinds of contradictions in the Dark World. Now there were 2 representative forces stationed in Tiannan. One was the Annan rebel army played by the Wang family of Beihai. In the border war 3 years ago, Annan State cooperated with the 5 superpowers to invade the border of Zhongzhou State in the name of the rebel army. Now this name had been used by Zhongzhou State for a long time. The elites of the Thunderbolt Battalion were traded to the Wang family of Beihai by the Dongqing clan. Wang Tianzong handed the Thunderbolt Battalion to Dijiang and asked him to be stationed in Tiannan. The reason that Zhongzhou State gave Annan State was also very fair. Annan State said that there was an uncontrolled rebel army in the country. Based on the principle that the 2 sides were friendly neighbors, Zhongzhou State directly sent troops to help Annan State suppress the rebellion. After entering Tiannan, Dijiang plundered all the resources here as fast as he could and sent them to the Wang family of Beihai. Then, under the constant protests of Annan State and the pressure exerted by the United Nations, the army of Zhongzhou State withdrew from Annan State under the leadership of Dijiang. But the so-called retreat was just a name. The Thunderbolt Battalion led by Dijiang retreated. The rebel army of Annan State led by Dijiang began to rise again. When they were in uniform, they were the army, and they might be pressured by the military. But after burning the military uniforms, they were the rebels of Annan State, and they had no scruples at all. Now the Tiannan Freedom Corps established by Dijiang, with the secret support of the Wang family of Beihai, had a scale of 50,000 people, and they were all armed and elite. With the support of the Border Control Corps, this was already the greatest force in Tiannan. The other force belonged to the Purgatory of Heaven capital. The Purgatory of Heaven capital took the initiative to find Annan State. Knowing that it might not be able to recapture its territory, Annan State had no choice. Even if it knew that the Purgatory of Heaven capital was also up to no good, Annan State could only pin its hopes on them for the time being. Therefore, with the support of Annan State, the Purgatory of Heaven capital quickly gained a foothold in Tiannan, and its current strength was only slightly weaker than that of the Wang family of Beihai. In addition, the major forces of the Dark World had established secret strongholds in Tiannan. But with the war in the Dark World, the major forces had no energy to invest in Tiannan for the time being, so their strength was not to be feared. This was the current situation of Tiannan. Zhongzhou State, the Wang family of Beihai. Annan State, the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Plus the major forces of the Dark World that might participate in the future. The land of more than 30,000 square kilometers was not big, and it was the area of a small province. But the geographical location here was really too important. As long as it was occupied, it was possible to go north to Zhongzhou State and south to Annan State. Even if the force that occupied here did not have this strength, it could get the expected huge benefits if it swayed a little between Zhongzhou State and Annan State in the future. Now the Dark World was in chaos, and the war was endless. But any chaos would dissipate. At that time, the land of Tiannan would definitely become the focus of the Dark World's attention. Li Tianlan looked at the map in front of him, thinking about what the East Emperor Palace would get if it developed in Tiannan. "It's too messy," he said softly. Not to mention the confrontation between the major dark forces in Tiannan in the future, even now the situation was not clear. It was definitely not easy for the East Emperor Palace to go to Tiannan and be sandwiched between the Purgatory of Heaven capital and the Wang family of Beihai. But compared to Zhongzhou State, Tiannan is the most suitable place for you to rise. Qin Weibai leaned against Li Tianlan and said softly, after the maneuver, the cooperation between the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City in Zhongzhou State may be further strengthened. Governor Sit seriously injured Gu Xingyun with the setting sun tonight, and the murderous weapon of Sai City will definitely change hands. Not only that, the special warfare system of the three provinces in the northeast, except for Guangdong, may also fall into the hands of Kunlun City. But with this result, the Northeast Special Warfare Headquarters of Zhongzhou State should be established. Now that you have grown to a certain extent, both the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City will try their best to limit your growth. The Special Warfare Headquarters of various regions will definitely be implemented in the shortest time. Although Zhongzhou State is large, under the pressure of the Special Warfare Headquarters, there are really not many regions that are suitable for your development. Li Tianlan nodded. Only Tiannan. Only Tiannan. Qin Weibai said with certainty, Tiannan is currently outside Zhongzhou State, but it is regarded as a possession by Zhongzhou State. But on the surface, everything in Tiannan has nothing to do with Zhongzhou State. Even the Tiannan Freedom Corps led by Dijiang now looks like a rebel army inside Annan State. Qin Weibai turned Li Tianlan's body around, looked into his eyes, and said, for the time being, Tiannan is still a place where the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State can't influence, but it is regarded as its own territory by Zhongzhou State. So if you go to Tiannan, no one in Zhongzhou State will object. Not only the East Emperor Palace, but maybe soon, all the forces in Zhongzhou State will go to Tiannan. It may be regarded as the last pure land of the free forces. The last pure land? Li Tianlan took out a cigarette, lit it, and took a deep breath. No matter how chaotic Tiannan was at present, it was still the land of Annan State in name. However, that land had now been completely out of control and became the battlefield of the Wang family of Beihai and the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Wherever the rebel army passed, there was naturally no effective regime left. Tiannan now belonged to the rebel area of Annan State. There was no order and no strong regime rule there. Annan State was helpless about the rebel area. Naturally, the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State could not intervene and build a new order there. So the rules of Zhongzhou State were basically useless there. In that case, it was indeed a pure land with its own forces. Whoever could rule Tiannan could create a new order in Tiannan. But, the Wang family of Beihai and the Purgatory of Heaven capital are there. The free forces in the country don't have such courage, do they? Li Tianlan shook his head. The Purgatory of Heaven capital was easy to deal with. But the Wang family of Beihai was a real behemoth in Zhongzhou State. Tiannan was regarded as a thing in the pocket by Zhongzhou State, and also by the Wang family of Beihai. The free forces of Zhongzhou State went to Tiannan province without the permission of the Wang family of Beihai, which was tantamount to snatching meat from the Wang family of Beihai. Who had the guts to do that? Now they don't have such courage, but soon they will. Qin Weibai smiled. If there are major problems inside the Wang family of Beihai and they can't take care of themselves, can they still take care of the interests of Tiannan? Li Tianlan was shocked and looked at Qin Weibai carefully. The Wang family of Beihai would have problems. As early as a few years ago, he heard from military counselor. But Qin Weibai's tone, did she want to take the initiative to cause internal problems in the Wang family of Beihai? Now this time, seemed a little earlier than what she said at the beginning. What do you want to do? Li Tianlan asked in a cautious tone. He frowned and said in a very firm tone, you can't do anything. For the Wang family of Beihai, he always had an instinctive vigilance and fear. Li Tianlan didn't know how powerful the Wang family of Beihai was, but it was definitely not something that the Samsara Palace could shake. I won't do anything stupid. Qin Weibai reached out and stroked Li Tianlan's face. Her hands were slightly cold, and her eyes were as gentle as water. I just want you to relax. Tell me about your plan. Li Tianlan said. This was the first time he asked about the Samsara Palace's plan. My plan is very simple, Qin Weibai smiled sweetly. After you go to Tiannan, use the funds in your hands to set up a trading company first. I will arrange for people to support the trading company. This is the fastest industry for you to establish a foothold in Tiannan and also your core foundation. With your strength, it is not difficult for you to establish a foothold in Tiannan. After that, the East Emperor Palace will slowly expand. Tianlan, have you ever thought about what kind of position Zhongzhou State will give you when you return to Zhongzhou State with more than 30,000 square kilometers of land in the future? There was a very shining light in Qin Weibai's eyes. It was a kind of persistence with strong expectation and longing. But Li Tianlan's heart slowly sank. What he wanted to hear was Qin Weibai's plan, not the future of the East Emperor Palace. The future of the East Emperor Palace was too simple in Qin Weibai's narration. It was so simple that Li Tianlan couldn't detect what Qin Weibai had arranged behind his back. Qin Weibai took off the green hairpin on her head and put it in Li Tianlan's hand. She whispered, "This is for you. Trade is your foundation in Tiannan, and this is your trump card in Tiannan." Li Tianlan was suddenly shocked. He didn't have to think to know what this hairpin was. He had a falling stars on his wrist. When the brave soldiers were close to each other, they would completely sense each other. In short, the murderous soldiers' energy storage time would be accelerated. The hairpin in Qin Weibai's hand was undoubtedly blue sky underworld of the Samsara Palace. Giving away the murderous weapon, Qin Weibai was not only generous, but most importantly, where did she get the power? My sister asked me to bring out blue sky underworld for you to use. Qin Weibai whispered, it will take at least 3 years for blue sky underworld to store energy. You also have a murderous weapon here. If you put them together, the storage time will be slightly faster. Anyway, blue sky underworld can't be used now, so it's better to leave it with you. If it can help you gain a foothold in Tiannan, my sister will be very happy. Li Tianlan looked at Qin Weibai silently. His hand trembled slightly, but his tone was still calm. Answer my question. He looked at Qin Weibai and said. What question? Qin Weibai blinked and began to play dumb. What does the Samsara Palace want to do? Li Tianlan looked at Qin Weibai, and the uneasiness in his heart gradually became stronger. It was an indescribable intuition. Perhaps there was a basis, but Li Tianlan couldn't tell. He just instinctively felt that something was wrong. Qin Weibai didn't speak, just turned her head to look at the map of Tiannan in front of her. Li Tianlan turned to look at the map. The atmosphere seemed to become silent and awkward for a moment. I don't deserve to know. After a long time, Li Tianlan suddenly asked. It's not that you don't deserve it. Qin Weibai shook her head without hesitation. Then tell me what I want to know. Li Tianlan said blandly, I don't like the feeling of being controlled. Even if the person who controls me is you, even if you do it for my sake, I don't like it. He wasn't sure what he wanted to know, but he suddenly felt a little uneasy in his heart. This kind of uneasiness had existed since Qin Weibai first appeared, but it was very faint. After 3 years, Qin Weibai appeared so abruptly that Li Tianlan couldn't tell what kind of feeling it was. But when Qin Weibai handed Blue Sky Underworld to him, the bad intuition in his heart suddenly became extremely strong. Qin Weibai handed Blue Sky Underworld to him. What would happen to the Samsara Palace? What would she do? Even if Blue Sky Underworld couldn't be used for the time being, it was a murderous weapon. Would she give it to someone else if she couldn't use it? Li Tianlan had never heard of this. We are going to do something in Snow Country. Qin Weibai hesitated and finally said. What is it? Li Tianlan asked. Don't ask, okay? Qin Weibai looked at Li Tianlan with a pleading look in her eyes. Li Tianlan's heart softened, but he forced himself to harden his heart and said calmly, I will know. You will know soon. Qin Weibai said softly, Tianlan, give me a little more time. 1 month, 2 months at most, and I will tell you everything, okay? She hugged Li Tianlan and leaned her head against his chest. She whispered, 2 months at most. Everything will be over. At that time, I'll come back to you and tell you all my secrets. We'll always be together. I won't do anything. I'll be raised by you at home peacefully. Is that okay? Her eyes were hazy and full of longing. Why 2 months later? Li Tianlan asked, touching her long hair. Qin Weibai didn't speak. She couldn't tell him that her longing would always be a longing. And she couldn't tell him that everything she said now was a lie. In the north. In Snow Country. In that world of ice and snow, she would try her best to drag the Wang family of Beihai into hell forever. Hell was in the north. Only when she fell into hell could Li Tianlan get the most free heaven. Tianlan, trust me one more time. I don't want to control your life. This is the last time. Believe me, it's really the last time. Qin Weibai said quietly. Her heart seemed to twitch into a ball. She used deception to get Li Tianlan's trust. She didn't know if Li Tianlan would forgive her when he knew the truth. She didn't dare to think about it. Okay. Li Tianlan held her body and nodded gently. Qin Weibai smiled brightly, like a flower blooming in the morning in early summer. She kissed Li Tianlan's face and said in a sweet voice, Good boy, this is my good husband. Call me again. Li Tianlan suppressed all the thoughts in his heart and ordered with a smile. Good husband. Qin Weibai called again obediently, her voice sweet and gentle. Call me again. Li Tianlan looked at Qin Weibai's cheeks gradually becoming rosy and smiled playfully. Qin Weibai shook her head. She leaned close to Li Tianlan, bit his ear, and whispered, Carry me to the room, and I'll call you on the bed, okay? Li Tianlan's breathing suddenly quickened. Okay? He really didn't think there was anything wrong with it. Li Tianlan suddenly bent down, picked up Qin Weibai's delicate body, and strode upstairs. The light was on in the master bedroom of the villa. Li Tianlan pushed open the door almost violently and subconsciously wanted to turn off the light. No. Qin Weibai's charming eyes were like silk. I don't want to turn off the light. I want to look at you. Li Tianlan growled and threw Qin Weibai on the bed. Qin Weibai's black hair spread on the bed wantonly, and the goddess under the light looked more charming and languid. Li Tianlan rushed over. Qin Weibai smiled and put her hands around Li Tianlan's neck. Her eyes were bright and sparkling, looking deeply at Li Tianlan's face. The man who made her willing to give up everything. The man she owed too much to. Qin Weibai looked at him quietly, as if she wanted to imprint his face in her soul. She never regretted what she had done. She just felt a little reluctant. Chapter 331. The night in Beihai was long. When the long night was about to pass, Wang Tianzong had returned to Mount Dibing from Lin'an. The lights on Mount Dibing were shining. The bright and dazzling light completely dispelled the darkest night before dawn. The light was like a curtain, shining on every corner of the mountain. There were figures everywhere from the foot of the mountain to the top of the mountain. The internal security forces of the Wang family of Beihai were all in action. The strong light lit up everywhere. In the dark night, there were no shadows on the mountain or at the foot of the mountain. There was silence in front of Emperor Hall. This was the place where the light was focused, but everyone nearby intentionally or unintentionally avoided it. The rockery and garden in front of the hall had completely disappeared. After the mess after the war was cleaned up, it looked extremely empty. 3 middle-aged men in the standard military uniforms of Beihai province knelt in front of the silent hall with pale faces, sweating all over their faces. Wang Tianzong, who just came back and saw this scene, suddenly felt his heart sink. The sword energy on the top of the mountain had dissipated, but the fierce sword intent still remained. Wang Tianzong felt all this, and his strength seemed to be gradually disappearing. He stood there silently and did not move for a long time. The elites of the internal security forces came and went. Finally, someone saw Wang Tianzong, so they instinctively saluted and called him Your Majesty. There were more and more people. The solemn atmosphere continued to spread on Mount Dibing. Wang Tianzong's brain was buzzing. He only felt that countless figures were shaking in front of him. The perfect state of mind that had been maintained for many years was in chaos. The light seemed so dazzling that he could not see everything clearly. Your Majesty, Your Majesty, countless people were shouting in his ears. It was a mess. Wang Tianzong finally came to his senses. In front of him, the elites of the internal security forces had knelt on the ground. Everyone had a complicated expression, mixed with inexplicable fear and shame. Wang Tianzong took a deep breath. His expression was calm, and the light deep in his eyes returned to indifference. He was the sword emperor of the Wang family of Beihai. The emperor could have fear and timidity. But under the light, the emperor could only have majesty. Do what you should do. Wang Tianzong said and slowly walked to his palace. The 3 middle-aged men kneeling in front of the palace grew increasingly nervous, and a large amount of sweat even seeped out of their foreheads. The military uniforms the 3 of them wore were modified by the Wang family of Beihai, but the military ranks on their shoulders were no different from those of Zhongzhou state. 1 lieutenant general and 2 major generals were the 3 main leaders of the internal defense force of the Wang family of Beihai. Although they were retainers of the Wang family of Beihai, they were still generals of Zhongzhou state even if they were out of Beihai province. In theory, they could have a position that matched their military ranks in any place in Zhongzhou state. But now, these 3 generals with real power were kneeling silently, and there was even some fear on their faces. Wang Tianzong walked up to them. The 3 generals lowered their heads, the sweat on their foreheads already dripping to the ground. Get up. Wang Tianzong said. The 3 of them did not get up. The corner of the lieutenant general's mouth twitched as he said hoarsely, Your Majesty, what's going on? Wang Tianzong looked at the lieutenant general in front of him and said calmly, Wu Qiu, you are my brother. Stand up and talk. Wu Qiu, the commander of the Internal Defense Force, was a lieutenant general of Beihai, the most senior expert of the half-step invincible realm in the Wang family of Beihai, and the patriarch of the wealthy Wu family. He was one of Wang Tianzong's most trusted confidants. No matter what happened tonight, Wu Qiu could not participate in it. This was the most basic trust. Wu Qiu's face turned red. He seemed to be a little excited, but more ashamed. He gritted his teeth but did not get up. He just said in a hoarse voice, "Your Majesty, I'm incompetent." A group of thunder-shocking realm experts of unknown origin sneaked into the top of the mountain. They wore some special equipment and attacked Madam. This is my negligence. Wang Tianzong's eyes suddenly condensed. A group of thunder-shocking realm experts sneaked into the top of the mountain? He asked softly after a moment of silence. Yes. Wu Qiu's voice was full of embarrassment and embarrassment. The Internal Defense Force was stationed at the foot of the mountain and halfway up the mountain. Only a small number of elites were stationed at the top of the mountain. The enemy suddenly launched an attack at the top of the mountain. The Internal Defense Force had no time to support them no matter how fast they reacted. It seemed that the responsibility of the Internal Defense Force was not great. But it was the negligence of the Internal Defense Force to let the enemy sneak into the top of the mountain. Not to mention that the monitoring eyes of the Internal Defense Force could monitor every corner outside the top of the mountain. Even the guests who came and went to Mount Dibbing were strictly examined by the Internal Defense Force. They attacked the hostess of the Wang family of Beihai at the top of the mountain. This was completely inconceivable before. Wu Qiu, you have been really careless these years. Wang Tianzong said in a low voice after a long silence. Wu Qiu, who kept sweating, calmed down and said in a deep voice, "It's my negligence. Get up." Wang Tianzong shook his head. The Internal Defense Force comes up with a new plan that can ensure the safety of Mount Dibbing in the future. I want to see this report in 3 days. Yes. Wu Qiu stood up and bowed deeply. The other 2 major generals still knelt where they were and did not dare to move. Wang Tianzong's eyes fell on the 2 of them. He was silent for a moment and then whispered, "I can trust Wu Qiu. But can I trust you?" "Your Majesty." The 2 major generals raised their heads at the same time and looked terrified. Without the secret cover of the Internal Defense Force, the enemy can't sneak into Mount Dibbing, let alone bring equipment. Wu Qiu has not been in Mount Dibbing recently. This is his dereliction of duty, but the dereliction of duty can be investigated in the future. But the betrayal must be solved now. Wang Tianzong's voice became softer and softer, and a thick and cold killing intent slowly diffused from him. I don't know who is the traitor. If you are willing to stand out, I can let your family go. The treatment of the Internal Defense Force was excellent, but at the same time, the discipline was extremely strict. Ordinary officers with the rank below colonel, except for the elite stationed at the top of the mountain, were forbidden to go up the mountain without the transfer order. As for taking some special equipment up the mountain, it needed the signature of a commander and 2 deputy commanders of the Internal Defense Force. This was a loophole that could not be covered up. It seemed that the other party did not intend to cover it up. From the moment of attacking summer solstice, the other party had already regarded the hidden pawn buried in the Internal Defense Force as a chess piece. At present, it seemed that the 2 major generals in front of him were suspects, at least the biggest suspects. Wang Tianzong did not say what would happen if they were unwilling to stand out. Summer solstice was definitely his reverse scale. If no one was willing to stand out, Wang Tianzong did not even bother to investigate. The 2 major generals and their families might not be spared tonight. It was okay to kill the wrong person. Silence. In the dead silence, a major general suddenly moved. He reached out, took off the epaulette on his shoulder, and respectfully placed it in front of Wang Tianzong. Your Majesty, please keep your promise and let my family go. The major general wiped the sweat on his forehead, and his face had become completely calm. Wang Tianzong narrowed his eyes. Wu Qiu's face suddenly twisted. His eyes were filled with anger and a trace of disbelief. Wang Exin? How dare you betray the Wang family of Beihai? Wang Xian's face was slightly pale. He sighed and was about to speak. He didn't betray the Wang family of Beihai, but me. Wang Tianzong said lightly. Wang Xian was taken aback and kept silent. Who is it? Wang Tianzong asked. Wang Xian smiled bitterly and shook his head. Your Majesty, I don't know who they are. I'm just following orders. Whose orders are you following? Wu Qiu grinned grimly and took a step forward subconsciously. Wang Tianzong calmly stopped him. Wang Xian's expression became calmer. He looked at Wu Qiu with a trace of complexity in his eyes and then smiled. Commander, I'm following orders. As for whose orders, I don't mind saying it, but do you and your Majesty really want to hear it? It's Wang. Wang Xian opened his mouth, but just spat out 2 words. The space in front of Emperor Hall suddenly fell into absolute silence. Wang Xian's mouth was still moving. He seemed to want to say that name. But the space around him had been completely distorted, and even his mouth shape had become completely out of shape. He tried to say something, but he couldn't make a sound, and his mouth shape couldn't be recognized. Streaks of blood shot out from his body one after another. Wang Xian seemed to suffer great pain, and his eyes became crazy for a moment. I can understand your thoughts, but there must be a bottom line for everything. Whoever dares to cross this line must die. Wang Tianzong calmly said, You're right. I really don't want to hear it, and I don't need to. The vague sword intent filled every corner of Wang Xian's surroundings. Blood sprayed all over the sky. In the cold and sharp sword intent, Wang Xian's whole body gradually turned into a pile of minced meat, and finally turned into nothingness in the sword energy. Wu Qiu stood beside Wang Tianzong, and his eyes were calm and cold. Your Majesty, just let it go. Until Wang Xian's body disappeared, Wu Qiu gritted his teeth and asked. It's not the time. Wang Tianzong was silent for a while and shook his head. He reached out his hand, and the Major General epaulet on the ground fell into his hand. He handed the epaulet to Wu Qiu casually. He said flatly, Find a suitable person, let him take it, and then report it to the political department of Zhongzhou State. Remember your plan. I want to see it as soon as possible. Wu Qiu took the epaulet respectfully and answered. Wang Tianzong turned around and walked to the main hall. Let Xian Ming come to see me. As he said this, he put his hand in front of the door of Emperor Hall. His movements were a little hesitant. From an angle that Wu Qiu couldn't see, his eyes were scared and worried. The door of Emperor Hall was pushed open little by little. Wang Tianzong walked in. The desk lamp was on in the bedroom in the hall. The orange light illuminated a corner of the bedroom, which looked very warm. Summer Solstice's exquisite body was curled up on the bed at this time, and her whole body was shaking uncontrollably, as if she was suffering great pain. Wang Tianzong walked into the bedroom silently, got on the bed, lifted the heavy quilt that was out of season, and held Summer Solstice tightly in his arms. Summer Solstice's body was extremely cold, as if there was no temperature at all. Wang Tianzong held her. There was silence. It's okay. Summer Solstice took the initiative to speak. Her voice was a little trembling, but it was extremely gentle. She smiled reluctantly, but it was very beautiful. It's not very painful. It's just that I haven't done it for so many years, and I'm not used to this feeling. Do you know who did it? Wang Tianzong asked in a low voice, holding Summer Solstice's hand tighter and tighter, as if he wanted to give all his warmth to her. Summer Solstice lay in Wang Tianzong's arms and shook her head. Wang Tianzong stopped talking. In fact, there was no need to ask. He remembered the woman who had said in the World Palace last night that she would let the Wang family of Beihai fall into hell forever. His eyes became cold and piercingly cold. I'm cold. Summer Solstice said softly. Wang Tianzong restrained his killing intent, hugged her as much as he could, and covered her with the quilt. It's okay. Summer Solstice said, It'll be fine at dawn. I haven't used the sword for many years, and my body can't bear the sword intent. In fact, it's not a big deal. It'll be okay if there are several more attacks like this. In the past, you spoiled me too much. If I could do it from time to time, maybe I would have adapted to it. There won't be a second time. Wang Tianzong said in a deep voice. Let summer solstice do it from time to time. How could he bear to do it? Summer solstice. This name had gradually been forgotten by the dark world over the years. After the battle against Li Guangtu, there was no more legend about her in the dark world. No one knew her current state. Except for Wang Tianzong. In the decades of the Wang family of Beihai, summer solstice was the only person who had taken the whole set of immortality potion. The purpose of doing so was not to recover her injury. It was to let her live. This was Wang Tianzong's decision that year. He just wanted summer solstice to stay with him and grow old with him. He didn't care about combat capability. In his eyes, summer solstice, who was quietly playing with flowers and plants, was the most beautiful summer solstice. Use another set of immortality potion. Wang Tianzong said softly. His tone was calm and ordinary, as simple as letting summer solstice eat a piece of candy. Fool, it doesn't work. Summer solstice chuckled and said, and it's not necessary. It's impossible for my injury to recover. When dawn comes, I guess I'll be fine. Wang Tianzong was silent. He was very clear about summer solstice's current state. In terms of sword intent, summer solstice was still at the peak of the invincible realm, even not much inferior to him. In terms of foundation, she was now only equivalent to an ordinary woman. The battle that year was too fierce, and her foundation was destroyed in that battle. If it weren't for the immortality potion, summer solstice wouldn't even have lived for a year after that battle. Although she survived successfully now, the result of her martial arts foundation being completely loose was that her sword intent was still there, but her body was getting worse and worse. In short, summer solstice could still exert the combat capability of the invincible realm. But her combat capability was extremely limited, and it couldn't be recovered. If summer solstice at her peak pulled out her sword, she could even fight against Wang Tianzong head-on. But her foundation was loose, so her sword intent became limited. She only had so much sword intent. Once it was used up, she would have no foundation and could never recover. To some extent, a peak of the invincible realm like summer solstice was a consumable. The cruelest consumable. Her combat capability would gradually decrease with the increase of the number of fights, and her foundation was not there. Every time she pulled out her sword, it would bring her extreme pain. Summer solstice said that she would be fine at dawn. At that time, it might just be that her body would no longer hurt. In the next few years, summer solstice's body could not fully recover. Wang Tianzong knew very well what those who attacked summer solstice were thinking. He was reluctant to let summer solstice fight. But those people obviously didn't think so. For them, the existence of summer solstice, in any general trend, would become a force that could change the battle situation. That was why there was the attack tonight. After this attack, for at least a few years, summer solstice would be pressed on Mount Dibbing and could no longer fight. Wang Tianzong took a deep breath and spat it out heavily. For many years, he didn't seem to be as aggrieved as he was now. I can actually understand what she did. Wang Tianzong whispered, but I can't accept it. Who? Summer solstice raised her head, looking confused. A woman as stupid as you. Wang Tianzong tidied the hair in front of summer solstice's forehead and said softly. To some extent, Qin Weibai and summer solstice were actually the same kind of people. There were always some women who could burn themselves unreservedly for their men and were willing to give everything of themselves, even their souls. In fact, there was one thing that Wang Tianzong didn't tell Li Honghe. Before he entered the invincible realm, the Wang family of Beihai was in the most dangerous period. When he was still tentatively contacting Kunlun City for cooperation. It was summer solstice who found the Gu family alone. She directly promoted the treason case of Zhongzhou state that shocked the dark world. At that time, Wang Tianzong was as ignorant as Li Tianlan was now. When everything happened, he understood what was going on. I'm not stupid. Summer Solstice wrinkled her nose and was a little dissatisfied. You're the stupidest. Wang Tianzong looked at Summer Solstice. The light in the bedroom was too dim, and Summer Solstice was too beautiful. So his eyes were a little blurred. Your Majesty, a voice sounded outside Emperor Hall, calm and cold. I'm Xian Ming. Xian Ming. The person in charge of all intelligence agencies of the Wang family of Beihai. The person in charge. Wang Tianzong took a deep breath and said calmly, What did you find? Who went to Mount Dibbing tonight? I can't be sure at the moment. Xian Ming paused for a while and said, It's very likely to be Samsara Palace. There are 2 people, suspected to be saint and military counselor. I'll continue to investigate. There's no need to investigate. Wang Tianzong sneered and said calmly, Find another direction. 10 days, I'll give you 10 days. No matter what method you use, no matter how much you pay, I want the address of the headquarters of Samsara Palace. At all costs. Remember, you only have 10 days. The voice of Xian Ming outside the hall fell silent. Wang Tianzong lowered his head and looked at Summer Solstice in his arms. He whispered, 10 days later, I'll avenge you. You have to be careful. Summer Solstice blinked her eyes and looked tired. Her eyelids gradually closed. Don't be impulsive. Well, go to sleep. Wang Tianzong stroked her head. The bedroom gradually fell silent. Tianzong, in the silence, Summer Solstice's voice sounded like a whisper. Do you think there will be a place for me on the stone of formidable person in the future? Of course there will be. Wang Tianzong whispered, There must be. Where will it be? Summer Solstice's voice became softer. No matter where you are, I'll be by your side. Wang Tianzong whispered, I'll always be by your side. Very good. Summer Solstice smiled softly. Very good, and it was the best. She never regretted becoming Wang Tianzong's wife, nor did she regret her contribution to the Wang family of Beihai. They would stay together until their hair turned white. As long as she could be with him, even if it was a mountain of knives, a sea of fire, or a cliff, as long as he was still by her side, his temperature was the most desirable tenderness. The light gradually bloomed in the sky. The coldness and pain like night began to fade. Chapter 332. Sober. He was in a coma. His consciousness swayed back and forth between the dead silence and the shimmer. The sound of the helicopter rotors whistling in his ears was intermittent. The pain spread from his heart to the top of his head and to the soles of his feet. The intense pain surrounded his body, and then he became numb. The formless energy seemed to be doing its best to disintegrate his body, as if it was trying to make his body as fragmented as possible, turning it into a bloody mess. Gu Xingyun could not move. But his consciousness was struggling desperately. One step further was life. One step backward was death. Gu Xingyun opened his eyes again. In his sight, there was still a dim cabin. The light in the cabin was faint, so everything in his sight became blurred. Blood gushed from the corners of his mouth. It was warm and then cold. Gu Xingyun was in a trance. The faint light in the cabin seemed so dazzling. The intense pain and numbness occupied all his consciousness. His mind was in a trance as if he would fall into eternal darkness at any time. Gu Xingyun subconsciously grabbed the seat beside him and bit the tip of his tongue with all his strength. His lips and teeth were numb. He misjudged his strength and directly bit his tongue. The blood poured into his mouth and was spat out by him. Different from the sharp pain in his body, his will was suddenly refreshed. You're awake. A voice sounded in his ear. In some blurred vision, Gu Qianchuan's face gradually became clear. Gu Xingyun looked at him. His face was completely distorted in the severe pain, looking ferocious and horrible. But his eyes were extremely bright. They were indifferent and vigilant, like two cold stars inlaid on a ghost face. Gu Qianchuan was also looking at Gu Xingyun. His face was calm, and his eyes were calm. Only calmness. The helicopter roared to the northwest at a high altitude. The two most powerful men in Kunlun City looked at each other quietly. "You're badly hurt." Gu Qianchuan took the initiative to speak after a long time. His voice lost its former respect. When he spoke, he turned his head and looked in another direction. Gu Xingyun could not see his eyes. His mouth was still sweet and warm. His voice was a little vague and short. "Where are you?" This question was somewhat inexplicable. Gu Qianchuan understood what he meant. "We're on our way back to Kunlun City." Kunlun City. Back to Kunlun City. Gu Xingyun's fuzzy consciousness was suddenly startled, and he became sober again. "No. We can't go back." Gu Qianchuan was stunned and looked at Gu Xingyun in confusion. Gu Xingyun's breathing became more and more rapid, and he just kept repeating, "You can't go back." Kunlun City. That was the most glorious achievement of his life, and it was also the place where he felt the most at ease. But in his current state, Kunlun City was the most dangerous place for him. Gu Qianchuan gradually understood. He vaguely knew why Gu Xingyun didn't want to go back. Because Li Shi was still in Kunlun City. Li Shi. It was the wife of the governor who had hardly walked out of Kunlun City for more than 20 years. As the first elder of Kunlun City, Gu Qianchuan knew very well that the relationship between Gu Xingyun and Li Shi was not harmonious. But he didn't expect their relationship to be so stiff. When Gu Xingyun was seriously injured, he did not dare to go home. What was he afraid of? Gu Qianchuan suddenly felt pity for Gu Xingyun. He did not understand the meaning of such a couple. "If we don't return to the Kunlun realm, are we going to Yuzhou?" Gu Qianchuan looked at Gu Xingyun and asked. Gu Xingyun suddenly fell silent. He was the war god of Zhongzhou state, but it was even more dangerous to go to Yuzhou when he was seriously injured and powerless than to go back to Kunlun City. He trembled and reached out his hand. His stiff and numb arm struggled to reach into his arms and pulled out a button from the interlayer of his clothes. The buttons were small and delicate, and they shone with a strange light in the dark cabin. Gu Xingyun seemed to want to crush the button, but his palm shook, so the button fell to the ground and rolled in front of Gu Qianchuan. Gu Xingyun's scattered eyes suddenly condensed. Gu Qianchuan narrowed his eyes. The roar of the rotor still filled the cabin. But the atmosphere in the cabin suddenly became a little strange. Gu Qianchuan picked up the button in front of him and looked at Gu Xingyun thoughtfully. Gu Xingyun quietly looked at Gu Qianchuan. After a long silence, he said lightly, "Give it to me." Gu Qianchuan did not move. He looked at Gu Xingyun for a long time and suddenly asked, "Why?" The meaning of this sentence was simple, but the meaning behind it was unusual. "Why? Why should I give it to you? If you die, I will be the city governor of Kunlun City." So, why? Kunlun City was not harmonious inside. The intrigue between the city governor and the first elder was not a secret. Gu Xingyun and Gu Qianchuan knew what each other wanted. In such an environment, there was no need to hide. Gu Qianchuan just wanted to ask why. This was not a fallout, but if Gu Xingyun could not give an answer, the consequences would be more serious than a fallout. "I can't die," Gu Xingyun said calmly, and his face grew darker. Situ Tsanyue's setting sun almost completely hid him. He could escape and let Gu Qianchuan take him away from Lin Hen, which was an overdraft of his potential. In his current state, let alone Gu Qianchuan, even an ordinary person could easily kill him. But the look in his eyes became calm, even a little calm. Why? Gu Qianchuan still asked this question, but it had a different meaning. "If I die, do you have enough strength to guard Kunlun City?" Gu Xingyun laughed sarcastically. "Now your strength is barely in the top 10 of the holy list, not to mention the divine list. You can't guard Kunlun City after my death." His words were blunt and merciless. A touch of anger flashed in Gu Qianchuan's eyes. The current result is the best for you. Gu Xingyun's eyes were dim, his breath was getting weaker, and his breathing became heavy. I'm seriously injured, but I won't die. I'm not sure whether I will become the second summer solstice. During my recovery time, the power of Kunlun City is in your hands. As long as I don't die, it is a deterrent to the outside world. Kunlun City, ahem. Kunlun City will always exist. What's wrong with this result? He looked at Gu Qianchuan and mocked, with your current strength, you won't even be a match for Dijiang of the Wang family of Beihai in a life and death battle. Can you guard Kunlun City by yourself? The biggest disagreement between him and Gu Qianchuan was the power of Kunlun City. He did not want to see Kunlun City disappear and be ruined. Gu Qianchuan did not want to either. Therefore, the negotiations between the two were quite sincere. What you said makes sense. Gu Qianchuan pondered for a long time before nodding. He handed the button in his hand to Gu Xingyun. Gu Xingyun had no strength to crush the button, so he simply put it in his mouth and bit it, swallowing it with the cool liquid in the button. Gu Qianchuan watched Gu Xingyun take the medicine. The effect of the medicine was immediate. Although Gu Xingyun was still weak, his breathing gradually began to become stable. Gu Qianchuan knew what Gu Xingyun was eating. Strictly speaking, it was also an immortality potion. It was just an immortality potion belonging to the Zhongzhou state government. This was the immortality potion that Zhongzhou state traded with the Wang family of Beihai when they first developed the immortality potion hundreds of years ago. Zhongzhou state decomposed the immortality potion and then added a large number of precious medicinal materials. Finally, it became the healing holy medicine that Gu Xingyun took. This thing was also based on vitality, but it would not prolong life. Instead, it would infinitely expand the recovery speed of injury. This was the exclusive holy medicine of the war god of Zhongzhou state. Although there was only one drop in a button, it was equivalent to a life. What are you going to do? Gu Qianchuan looked at Gu Xingyun, who became dizzy again, and his eyes flickered. What will you do for me? Gu Xingyun twitched the corner of his mouth and said in a low tone. This time, he was really seriously injured. Gu Xingyun did not know how long he could recover. He was not even sure if he could maintain the combat capability of the invincible realm. During the period of his recovery, even if he was reluctant, he had to hand over the power of Kunlun City to Gu Qianchuan. Gu Qianchuan would certainly not let him stay outside when he had the power. During the period of his recovery, he was basically under house arrest by Gu Qianchuan. One day, when his combat capability was restored, if Gu Qianchuan did a good job, it would not be so easy for him to take back the power of the city lord. Kunlun City was a city, but it had a short time to rise and its foundation was insufficient. It looked like a family. In the family, the city lord was not necessarily the strongest. The key was who held the power of the family. I have a manor in Yinzhou with a good environment. If you don't want to stay in Kunlun City, you can go there to recover. Gu Qianchuan was silent for a while and whispered. His tone was extremely sincere. Gu Qianchuan twitched the corner of his mouth and said indifferently, okay. He really did not want to stay in Kunlun City. When he thought of Kunlun City without the combat capability, he would feel fear. Instead of that, it was better to accept Gu Qianchuan's house arrest, which seemed to be out of good intentions. What else do you want? Gu Qianchuan asked seriously. Gu Xingyun thought for a moment and said calmly, it's boring to be alone. Let Qingqing accompany me. Li Qingqing. Gu Xingyun and Li Shi's daughter. She was also Li Shi's reverse scale. As long as Li Qingqing was controlled by his side, Gu Xingyun would not worry about what Li Shi would do. Gu Qianchuan did not need to worry either. So he nodded and said with a smile, very thoughtful. Gu Xingyun nodded. He seemed to want to say something, but his spirit could no longer support him and he passed out again. The helicopter flew across the night sky to the northwest. Over the mountains and the Great Lake, the air gradually became cold. When Gu Xingyan opened his eyes again, Kunlun Mountain, which seemed to be unchanged for thousands of years, was already in front of him. He regained some spirit. But the strong sense of weakness became more and more obvious, so that he struggled to sit up. Have we arrived? Gu Xingyan asked in a hoarse voice. His brain was confused, and he had a terrible headache. Yes. Gu Qianchuan nodded. I have arranged it. Qingsheng has taken a helicopter to Yinzhou an hour ago. Good. Gu Xingyan nodded. Looking out of the window at Kunlun City, which had appeared in his sight, he felt a little more confident. The helicopter landed at the small airport of Kunlun City. Gu Qianchuan quietly helped Gu Xingyan back to his residence. It was cold in Kunlun. The stove in Gu Xingyan's residence was very hot. The room was warm and comfortable. Gu Xingyan sat down on the sofa, gasped, and said faintly, I'll stay here for a few more days. After this matter is completely resolved, I'll immediately set off for Yinzhou. This matter was undoubtedly about cooperating with the Wang family of Beihai to assassinate Li Honghe. If Li Honghe died in Lin'an, nothing would happen. If Li Honghe did not die, it would cause an uproar. Gu Xingyan and Gu Qianchuan left halfway. They did not even know the result of the assassination. Go ahead. Gu Xingyan glanced at Gu Qianchuan and said indifferently. Gu Qianchuan nodded and turned to leave. Gu Xingyan sat on the sofa and looked at Gu Qianchuan's back. His eyes became deep, as if all the temperature had disappeared. What if he temporarily handed over the power of Kunlun City? In this battle with Situ Cangyue, what if the murderous weapon setting sun fell into Gu Qianchuan's hands? As long as he could recover, both the murderous weapon and the power would be his. Gu Xingyan leaned on the sofa, closed his eyes, and muttered to himself, still too young. As soon as Gu Qianchuan stepped out of the door, a beautiful white shadow appeared in front of him. Gu Qianchuan was stunned. Looking at the woman in front of him, his eyes flickered. The woman's face was extremely beautiful. She wore a white dress and had picturesque eyebrows. Her hair was neatly combed and soft. The long waterfall-like hair seemed to be mixed with snowflakes, and the ends of her hair were a little white. However, this did not weaken her charm. Instead, it made her look more deadly attractive. Heavenly beauty was a perfect description for the woman in front of him. She was beautiful to the extreme, like a colorful ink painting spread out in the snow, unforgettable. Sister-in-law. Gu Qianchuan was silent for a while and said hello with a smile. The woman in front of him, at least for now, was still the hostess of Kunlun City, whether in name or in fact. Although she had never expressed any opinion on the internal affairs of Kunlun City, no one would question her identity. Li Shi. She was the wife of the governor of Kunlun City and the only wife of Gu Xingyan. Where is Qingsheng? Li Shi stood in front of Gu Qianchuan and asked straightforwardly. Her voice was crisp and could even be said to be pleasing to the ear. She spoke very quickly, but the words that came out of her mouth were always strange. Her tone seemed to be very impatient, but there was no emotion in her voice. She was not stiff and mechanical. It was an almost empty numbness. This was obviously a peerless beauty that could not be described with any gorgeous words, but there was no aura. Under the gorgeous appearance, there was only emptiness and numbness. I arranged for Qingsheng to go out to play. Gu Qianchuan smiled and said, This is the meaning of the governor. Where is Qingsheng? Li Shi asked again. Gu Xingyan was calm and just shook his head. He whispered, The governor is inside. He stepped aside to make way. Li Shi hesitated for a moment, but still stepped into Gu Xingyan's courtyard. Gu Qianchuan turned his head and looked at Li Shi's white dress fluttering in the wind and snow. His eyes were playful and cold. Gu Xingyan did not dare to return to Kunlun City because he was seriously injured. He did not dare to return here until he controlled Li Qingsheng. Undoubtedly, he was afraid of his wife, Li Shi. He was not on good terms with Gu Xingyan. But even so, he would rather believe himself, who wanted to compete with him for the control of Kunlun City, then Li Shi. Husband and wife? Oh, what kind of husband and wife were they? Li Shi walked into the room from the courtyard. Gu Xingyun still leaned on the sofa. He just glanced at Li Shi casually and was too lazy to move his body. Where is Qingqing? Li Shi asked directly. In Kunlun City, she almost never talked to Gu Xingyun. Even if she occasionally spoke, she was straightforward. Qingqing should go out and have a walk. It is not good for her to stay in Kunlun City all the time. I should have time in the next few years. I will take her with me and hand her over to me. Gu Xingyun said indifferently. Li Shi looked at Gu Xingyun quietly. You are hurt, she said. Her tone was not the worry of a wife, nor the pleasure of an enemy. It was plain, empty, and numb, which made people feel uncomfortable. Seriously injured. Gu Xingyun smiled. His eyes were a little cold, and his tone was a little angry. The full blow of setting Sunday ha, Situtsanyue, that bitch. Bitch. Li Shi's delicate body shook quietly. The full blow of the murderous weapon setting sun, she knew very well what it meant. Many years ago, she had personally witnessed another murderous weapon bombarding another woman's body at close range. In the monstrous sword intent and flowing light, the murderous weapon was broken, and the invincible silence was destroyed. That murderous weapon was called the infinite sky. The power of setting sun was not as good as the infinite sky. But in the same way, Gu Xingyun's strength was not as good as the woman who shattered the infinite sky. Will you die? Li Shi asked calmly. I don't want to die. Gu Xingyun shook his head. Li Shi finally understood why her daughter left Kunlun City. She raised the corner of her mouth slightly, revealing a sneer and mockery with obvious emotions. So you let Gu Qianchuan take Qingqing away? You control Qingqing because you are afraid that I will kill you when you are seriously injured? If you kill me, Qingqing will die. Gu Xingyun looked at Li Shi calmly. Are you willing to kill me? Li Shi's eyes suddenly burst with anger and contempt. Do you know what you are doing? You threaten your wife with your own daughter. Gu Xingyun, what kind of man are you? You are a bastard. Hypocritical and disgusting. You don't deserve to be a man at all. Bastard, disgusting, not worthy to be a man. In more than 20 years, this was the longest sentence Li Shi had said to Gu Xingyun. But this sentence was like the sharpest knife, penetrating the anger and resentment that Gu Xingyun had suppressed for many years. His elegant face became distorted in an instant, and he suddenly stood up from the sofa. Li Shi was motionless. Gu Xingyun's eyes were red, and he pinched Li Shi's slender white neck. I am a bastard? I don't deserve to be a man? Then who do you say is a man? Say it. B*TCH, you are also a B*TCH. Slap. Gu Xingyun, who was like a crazy devil, slapped Li Shi's pretty face hard. Who is the man in your heart? Li Kuangtu. He had a good time King you, didn't he? I heard that you and Situtsanyue served him together. Shameless B*TCH. How am I inferior to her? Say it, tell me. Li Shi was slapped to the ground. Her face was red and swollen, but she still raised her head and looked at Gu Xingyun with disdain. That was a kind of arrogance, although embarrassed, but still unwilling to compromise and give in. Gu Xingyun seemed to be familiar with the arrogance. At that time. Those years. He had personally sent this woman to the side of the young chosen one. She stood so proudly beside him, looking down at everyone like a goddess. Including Gu Xingyun himself. Gu Xingyun's eyes became scarlet, and he stared at Li Shi. Are you a man? Li Shi wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth, and her eyes were full of contempt. I am not a man. Gu Xingyun laughed wildly. Don't you know whether I am a man or not? Don't you know how Qingqing came to be? Li Shi's face was pale. She stood up tremblingly, and said coldly, the thing I regret most is to give birth to Qingqing for you. Slap. The furious Gu Xingyun slapped Li Shi's face again. Regret? He sneered and looked at Li Shi, who fell to the ground. You regret giving birth to my daughter. Don't you regret giving birth to Li Guangtu's daughter? Don't forget that you killed that bastard and Li Guangtu with your own hands. Regret? What qualifications do you have to regret? You bitch. Ha, Li Shi sneered and took a breath. You gave your woman to your opponent and willingly wore a green hat for many years. Are you proud? I am a bitch. Why didn't you say that when you asked me to get close to him? What do you have to be proud of? As long as you are alive, there will always be green on your head. What are you proud of? What am I proud of? What am I proud of? Gu Xingyun's face was pale, and blood gushed from the corner of his mouth again, but he became excited. He suddenly stretched out his hand, grabbed Li Shi's hair, and dragged her out of the window. Outside the window was the constant wind and snow. Dawn broke. Kunlun City was shimmering. Look! Gu Xingyun pointed out the window. These are all mine. Kunlun City is mine, and you are also mine. I have the entire special warfare system of Zhongzhou State. What am I proud of? What do you think I am proud of? Everything in exchange for a green hat. Is it really worth being proud of? He is dead. Gu Xingyun looked furious and said with a grim smile, he is already dead. You're the one who killed him. All my shame has been washed clean. Li Shi fell to the ground. Her cheeks were swollen, and her face was bleak. That was despair and numbness without any hope. This is what you should do. You shouldn't insult me with these things. Gu Xingyun kept gasping. He looked at Li Shi sitting on the ground, and his eyes became a little dazed. He squatted down in front of Li Shi and reached out to touch Li Shi's face. All the irritation completely disappeared from his face, and his voice was indescribably gentle. Did I hurt you? You shouldn't have angered me. Li Shi looked at Gu Xingyun with empty eyes. This poor and hateful woman had nothing to say. As early as when she was taken into this snow mountain by her father, she had no choice. One wrong step led to many wrong steps. Until today, when she suddenly looked back at her own way, she found that all the things she had experienced along the way, in the bright and lonely silence, were all sins. As long as you are willing to be obedient, your father and Qingqing will be fine. Do you know? Gu Xingyun gently touched Li Shi's red and swollen face. The dark world has not been peaceful recently. Gu Qianchuan's strength is too poor. When necessary, you have to fight for Kunlun City and do what I should do. Can you do it? Li Shi nodded numbly. Go ahead. Gu Xingyun said with a smile, if you have the chance, kill Situ Tsangyue for me. All bitches deserve to die, right? Li Shi did not speak, stood up, and walked out numbly. Gu Xingyun narrowed his eyes and looked at her back. Li Shi's long hair fluttered, and the ends of her hair seemed to be white with snowflakes. The beauty had white hair. Gu Xingyun was in a trance and laughed at himself. They didn't depend on each other until their hair turned white. The Prime Minister knew that he was still holding his sword. Such a couple, even if they were rich and powerful, what he got from her was only emptiness and loneliness. Li Shi opened the door. It was early morning outside the window of Kunlun City. Chapter 333. If there was a return, there would naturally be a departure. When Dongqing Wudi, who had stayed up all night, pushed open the door of the study and walked into the living room, breakfast had been served in the dining room. Bai Qingxian put a bowl of clear porridge on the table, looked at Dongqing Wudi coming over, smiled gently, and said softly, let's eat first. Okay. Dongqing Wudi took the porridge and took a sip. He frowned slightly, and his eyes were full of solemnity. Wang Tianzong and Gu Xingyun appeared in Linmen. Li Honghe was seriously injured and attacked. Li Honghe did not die. Overnight, this piece of intelligence, which was not top secret, had flown to every corner of Zhongzhou State. The patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai and the contemporary god of war of Zhongzhou State attacked the former god of war of Zhongzhou State. The most important thing was that the person who was attacked was injured but not dead. Everyone knew what this meant. Dongxing Wudi received the news from Lin, and almost immediately. When he received the news, Dongxing Wudi's first reaction was to leave for Lin, and immediately. However, when he was preparing the helicopter, he returned to the study and held a core meeting of the Dongxing clan. In other words, it was a core network meeting of the giant group of Zhongzhou State. Dongxing Wudi was one of the 9 giants standing at the top of Zhongzhou State. As the actual number 1 person in the military, he was ahead of the old man of the Zhou family in terms of real power and ranking of giants. Therefore, after Dongxing Wudi officially became a giant in Zhongzhou State 2 years ago, the supreme leadership of the giant group had been transferred to the Dongxing clan. Dongxing Wudi could now be said to be the spiritual flag of the entire giant group. He should hold a core network meeting of the giant group. The meeting lasted most of the night. Dongxing Wudi, who was sitting at the table, looked solemn and gloomy. The result is not good? Bai Qingxian glanced at Dongxing Wudi and asked softly, "What did they say?" She was the top leader of Guangdong province of Zhongzhou State and one of the absolute core figures in the giant group. However, in the past few days in the Dongxing clan, Bai Qingxian seemed to be willing to be a good wife and mother, taking good care of Dongxing Wudi and Dongxing Hongguang. She paid no attention to the outside world and didn't even attend the core meeting last night. The corners of Dongxing Wudi's mouth twitched, and he said slowly, "Some people think that we shouldn't offend the Wang family of Beihai. On the contrary, we should use this opportunity to do Wang Tianzong a favor, so that we can get more bargaining chips when we trade with the Border Control Corps." A cold anger flashed in Bai Qingxian's eyes. "What's the reason?" she asked. "Reason," Dongxing Wudi sneered. "They think that Tianlan's situation is too dangerous to be worth the full investment of the giant group. Moreover, the identity of Rushi's fiancé doesn't seem to carry enough weight in their eyes." The old bastard of the Liu family directly took advantage of his seniority at the meeting and suggested that I carefully consider the engagement between Rushi and Tianlan. He even proposed the specific candidate. What was that? Does he really think he's the same as when he was still in office? Who did he propose? Bai Qingxian's tone was calm, without the slightest joy or anger. Dongxing Wudi hesitated, glanced at his wife, and whispered, "It's Wang Jingxin." Bai Qingxian's pupils suddenly contracted. Wang Jingxin, the most famous backbone of the young generation of the Wang family of Beihai in recent years. In the early years, his reputation was even higher than Wang Xingxiao's. Wang Jingxin was not a martial arts genius, but a political figure that the entire Wang family of Beihai had high hopes for. He was the best choice in terms of boldness, vision, and wisdom. Now he was regarded by many as the person who might finally reach the top in Zhongzhou State after 20 years. Wang Jingxin was the oldest of the young generation of the Wang family of Beihai. He was not from the lineal branch represented by Wang Tianzong, nor was he from the gradually growing power of Wang Qinglei's branch. Instead, he came from another branch whose power was not obvious and was extremely low-key. He was 32 years old, one of the governors of Jiangxia province, and the top leader of Lin'an, the provincial capital of Jiangxia province. With such a status, Wang Jingxin's existence could be said to be the focus of attention. Zhou Yuanshan, Dongxing Qiuqi of the giant group, Wang Jingxin of the southeast group. In every era, there were a few strong figures who began to show themselves in the political circle at a young age. They were young enough to be on an equal footing with the older generation. They were the focus of attention and were naturally regarded as the future leaders of Zhongzhou State. And Wang Jingxin was the most dazzling one in these people's eyes. Although he was 10 years older than Dongxing Rushi, if Dongxing Rushi really married him, it could not be said that she was marrying from a lower position. Bai Qingxian was not angry. Instead, she thought carefully for a while and then said lightly, "In this way, the Wang family of Beihai has already begun to act." She paused and continued, "It's very likely that after the failure of last night's action, Wang Tianzong has already given some instructions." Dongxing Wudi nodded. He agreed with his wife's statement. The power of the giant group was extremely huge. On paper, it was even not weaker than the two giants, the Prince group and the Southeast group. However, the groups composed of these giants were extremely loose. Unless it was a matter of life and death, they rarely had the same voice. The Liu family was the backbone of the giant group, but the family had a lot of cooperation with the Wang family of Beihai and was very close to some important figures of the Wang family of Beihai. The Liu family definitely did not mention Wang Jingxin at the meeting on a whim, nor did they make fun of Wang Jingxin. The Liu family mentioned Wang Jingxin, which meant that the Wang family of Beihai really had such an appeal now. They just used a more euphemistic action to test the attitude of the Dongqing clan. What about your attitude? Bai Qingxian asked. To a certain extent, the Liu family's suggestion could represent a force of the giant group. On the matter of how to deal with the Li family, the Dongqing family, the Bai family, and the Zhou family had reached a consensus. But under the three pillars of the wealthy families, those backbone forces also needed to be appeased. The Dongqing clan's refusal of the Liu family's proposal was far from enough to make the Liu family split, but they must try their best to appease the Liu family. This was a necessary lesson for a leader. I refused. Dongqing Wudi shook his head. Bai Qingxian did not speak, just looked at him quietly. Refusal was an attitude. But Bai Qingxian was not satisfied with such an attitude. Dongqing Wudi smiled helplessly and said seriously, "What do you think?" He knew Bai Qingxian very well. Bai Qingxian was known for being strong among the senior officials. When it came to Li Tianlan, her performance would only be more intense. Let Yuanshan suppress Wang Jingxin. That's my attitude. Bai Qingxian said. Yuanshan, Dongqing Wudi was a little hesitant. He had high hopes for Zhou Yuanshan, the eldest son-in-law. And if this matter succeeded, the significance would not be as simple as suppressing Wang Jingxin. Let's see what Yuanshan thinks. Dongqing Wudi said. Bai Qingxian nodded. Compared with Wang Jingxin, Yuanshan still has an advantage in seniority. He won't refuse. It's not a matter of seniority. Dongqing Wudi smiled bitterly. No matter what the problem is, as long as he has the heart, it's okay. Bai Qingxian's tone was concise. Dongqing Wudi was silent. Heart. This word represented many things. It could be said to be ambition or friendship. The focus of all things was not on the engagement between Wang Jingxin and Dongqing Rushi, nor on the core meeting inside the giant group. Li Honghe was attacked and did not die. That was the real focus. Li Honghe was dead. Nothing needed to be mentioned. Even the Dongqing clan would protect Li Tianlan at that time and would not do anything extra. But Li Honghe did not die. So this matter became an opportunity for the Li family to rise again. Li Honghe's identity was too special and lofty. As the former god of war of Zhongzhou State, he could be said to be one of the greatest veterans and contributors in Zhongzhou State in recent decades. No matter how down and out the Li family was, Li Honghe was also a veteran. The Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City attacked him. No matter what the reality was, at least on the surface, they were challenging the system that the six of Zhongzhou State followed and blatantly breaking the rules. So they had to pay the price. The price could be big or small. If someone was willing to stand up for the Li family, they could definitely get a lot of chips in this matter. The academics might take action, but they had always been steady and would not stand out. And from the standpoint of the academics, it was more in their interests to protect Li Tianlan after Li Honghe's death. So the Dongqing clan was most likely to stand up for the Li family. So as soon as the attack failed and the Dongqing clan held a core meeting, the Wang family of Beihai had begun to test Dongqing Wudi's attitude through the Liu family. Bai Qingxian suggested that Zhou Yuanshan suppress Wang Jingxin. If everything went well, Wang Jingxin would definitely go further this year or next year and become the governor of Jiangxia province. Bai Qingxian made it clear that she wanted Zhou Yuanshan to grab this position. It was not difficult to operate. It was the price that the Wang family of Beihai had to pay. But once Zhou Yuanshan went to Jiangxia, his identity would become very different. Li Honghe was attacked and did not die. Zhongzhou state had to give Li Honghe some compensation. Once Zhou Yuanshan went there, to some extent, he was no longer the future leader candidate of the giant group. Instead, he became the founder of the future political power of the Li family. This identity did not seem to change much in the short term, but in the long run, it was undoubtedly very subtle. If Li Tianlan could grow up in the future, Zhou Yuanshan would definitely become the veteran and leader of the new group, which would even go higher than when he was in the giant group. But the premise was that the Li family and Li Tianlan could grow up. Of course, there were risks, but the returns would also be extremely rich. Zhou Yuanshan and Wang Jingxin had their own advantages and disadvantages, but looking at 20 years later, Zhou Yuanshan's odds of winning were not high. Their abilities might be equal, but at the most critical moment, it was difficult for him to get the strongest support in the giant group. But if he entered the Li family, it might be a different scene. So Zhou Yuanshan would certainly not refuse to go to Jiangxia. As long as Dongqing Wudi agreed. What are you hesitating about? Bai Qingxian looked at Dongqing Wudi and asked. This was an extremely rare opportunity, especially for Li Tianlan. He was the young governor of Sai City and had a certain foundation in the dark world. Now he got the investment of the Flourishing Age Fund and had economic support. The future of the young people of the East Emperor Palace was promising and bright. With this opportunity, he could get the most important political power. If everything went well, the Li family would have risen again in Zhongzhou state. Although their current strength was still very weak, it was already in its embryonic form. They had everything they should have, and this was all Li Tianlan's power. Bai Qingxian smiled and said softly, "You haven't decided whether to stand up for the Li family or not?" Dongqing Wudi's eyelids twitched. Bai Qingxian's voice was gentle, but the content gradually became sharp. For the Li family, this game of chess has just begun, but for the Dongqing clan, years of planning has already reached the end stage. Back then, you wanted to ask for change and wanted to break the bottleneck of the Dongqing clan, so all this happened today. How brave the Dongqing clan was. Why have you become so cowardly at a time like this, when I need you the most to protect my plan? Wudi, you are the god of massacre of Zhongzhou state. Is it because your status has become higher that your courage has become smaller? Bai Qingxian turned her head to look out of the window and said in a flat tone, "I still prefer you in those days. You were high-spirited and fearless. At least at that time, you could and dared to protect some of the most important things to you. At that time, we were both very young. You could fight with Gu Xingyun for me, smash Wang Tianzong's car for your family, refuse to admit defeat even when you were beaten, and dare to open Li Guangtu's head with a wine bottle. You at that time were my favorite." Dongqing Wudi's eyes were in a trance. He seemed to remember the playboy's reckless life when he was young. He fought with Gu Xingyun, cursed at Wang Tianzong, and despised Li Guangtu. Although he often did not get any advantage, he got Bai Qingxian because of it. "I'm leaving." Bai Qingxian said softly, "Zhang Yu's seriously injured Gu Xingyun. There will be changes in the northeast soon. I must go back to stabilize the situation in Guangdong. I know you are under a lot of pressure now, so I won't try to influence you. But when Tianlan needs strength, I will not give up my persistence." Dongqing Wudi was silent. Bai Qingxian said it very clearly. He knew what her so-called persistence was. But when Li Tianlan needed support most, at the critical moment of the Li family's rise again, even if the whole world remained silent, Bai Qingxian would still stick to her persistence. Even if she had to bet everything, she would give all her strength without reservation. Some love did not need reason. Bai Qingxian took out a document from her bag and handed it to Dongqing Wudi. Dongqing Wudi took it and glanced at it. His face suddenly changed dramatically. It was a divorce agreement. And it was a divorce agreement that Bai Qingxian had signed. As long as Dongqing Wudi wrote his name on it, his years of husband and wife relationship with Bai Qingxian would end here. What does this mean? Dongqing Wudi frowned tightly. I didn't say I wouldn't do it. Tianlan will be fine. I will be fine. Bai Qingxian smiled gently. I want more than this. The corners of Dongxing Wudi's eyes kept twitching. Of course, he knew what Bai Qingxian wanted. The three pillars of the giant group had already reached a consensus that they would definitely support the Li family, but no one said much about how much support they would give. But this matter was crucial. The strength of their support for the Li family was directly related to how much the Li family would benefit from this matter. There was no doubt that Bai Qingxian wanted the full support of the Dongxing clan. That was the most difficult thing for Dongxing Wudi. Qingxian, don't force me. Dongxing Wudi's voice was slow like an old man's. From his own standpoint, he was naturally willing to fully support Li Tianlan. But supporting Li Tianlan and supporting the Li family were two completely different things. Although this was an opportunity for Li Tianlan, if he fully supported Li Tianlan, he would also encounter a lot of resistance. Dongxing Wudi naturally had to weigh the pros and cons. Born as a human, I always have to shoulder the responsibilities I should shoulder. Bai Qingxian's tone was indifferent. You're more than a soldier. She looked at the divorce agreement in Dongxing Wudi's hand and said slowly, I'm not threatening you with this. This is my decision after careful consideration. Wudi, sign it. After signing it, what you want to do has nothing to do with me, and what I want to do has nothing to do with you. Why torture each other? I don't want to see my husband, the only man I've ever loved in this life, gradually become the kind of person I despise the most. It's good for everyone to sign it. It has nothing to do with me. Dongxing Wudi's eyes flashed with angry sparks. What do you want to do? Qingxian, do you know what will happen once you do something? It's good to die. Bai Qingxian's voice was stiff and numb. These years, I've been living a life worse than death. I've been tired for a long time. Do you know how I survived? I hate you as much as I love you. Dongxing Wudi's body shook violently. At this moment, Bai Qingxian was so sad, like a heart that was bleeding at any time placed directly in front of him. He thought of Bai Qingxian's gentleness these days and her indifference for many years. What kind of struggle was this? The divorce agreement turned into ashes in Dongxing Wudi's hands. Dongxing Wudi's eyes became determined. I'll leave for Lin and right away. He said word by word, Yuan Shan will go to Jiangzhe. Trust me once. I'll do my best to fight for it. Bai Qingxian was silent for a while and nodded. You asked for a lot. Now it's time to reap the rewards. How can you not take a little risk? You did nothing. Why should Tianlan accept what he shouldn't have? How can he travel and his engagement with Rushi? Dongxing Wudi's eyes were a little weak. Bai Qingxian seemed to be satisfied with his attitude, but she was not moved. She still hated him. This was a knot that couldn't be untied. I'm leaving. Bai Qingxian walked to the door. When she was near the door, she paused and continued, I'll be back on the Mid-Autumn Festival. The sound of a helicopter whistling outside the window sounded. Bai Qingxian was about to leave. And Dongxing Wudi was about to set off. Bai Qingxian walked into the car. Dongxing Wudi got on the plane. One went south, and the other went north. They didn't do it for the Li family. They did it for Li Tianlan. After today, the Li family, which had been silent in Zhongzhou state for many years, would officially set off again under the leadership of Li Tianlan. They would go to the distance and the supreme place where they used to be. There were waves and storms ahead. But there must be an end when there was a start. Readers, 670548567 brothers who haven't added me, please add me. I can't post a group number in the book review section. Chapter 334. The night passed quietly. The intoxicating fragrance with an ambiguous aura still lingered in the gradually brightening dawn. The lights were on in the spacious and comfortable bedroom, and the air conditioner was on. The man and woman hugging each other were covered with quilts. Li Tianlan held Qin Weibai tightly, breathing evenly and relaxed. Qin Weibai, who hadn't slept all night, lay quietly in Li Tianlan's arms. She opened her moist and charming eyes and stared intently at Li Tianlan's face. It was not a particularly handsome face. It was delicate and even a little ordinary. However, even in his dreams, his face appeared extremely resolute and tranquil. There seemed to be a natural sword intent between his eyebrows, which added an indescribable grace to his whole face. Qin Weibai looked at him silently. There was no admiration or adoration in her eyes, only a deep and boundless affection. Li Tianlan moved his body and turned to Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai also moved and deliberately turned her back to Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan's palm subconsciously reached over and grasped Qin Weibai's plump breasts. Qin Weibai turned back again. Li Tianlan still didn't wake up. But without the plump softness in his hand, his palm subconsciously slid down and fell on her perky buttocks. It was not a lustful touch. It was a grip. He didn't have much since he was a child, so he was particularly afraid of losing what he cared about. Li Tianlan's strength was great. Qin Weibai felt a little pain, but she could clearly feel Li Tianlan's care for her and a strong desire to control her from this pain. The light outside the window was getting brighter and brighter. Qin Weibai turned gently in Li Tianlan's arms and turned back. Li Tianlan's palm moved up and down as she turned. He frowned and seemed to be a little distressed. Qin Weibai finally couldn't help giggling. Her laughter was crisp and cheerful. The phone on the bedside table vibrated. Qin Weibai took out the phone and glanced at it. She thought for a while and was about to get up. Li Tianlan's palm wrapped around her again. "I'll prepare breakfast for you." Qin Weibai lay on Li Tianlan's chest, kissed him, and said softly. Li Tianlan answered in a daze and let go of her hand. Qin Weibai took a deep look at him, got out of bed, took a shower, and opened the closet in the bedroom. She had not set foot in Zhongzhou State for several years. Therefore, the clothes in the wardrobe were all from a few years ago. Qin Weibai took out a white shirt, a pair of black high-waisted, wide-legged pants, and a pair of high heels. With her height of 1.76 meters, she was definitely a crane in a flock of chickens. Dressed like this, her pair of long and slender legs were simply soul-stirring. If such a woman were to be glanced at by her cold and dreamy eyes, men with poor psychological quality would probably be defeated on the spot. They would not even have the courage to approach her. Li Tianlan was still asleep. Qin Weibai left the bedroom and walked out of the villa. In the morning light, the air near the lake was moist and fresh. The two villas next to each other were quiet. Everyone was resting. Qin Weibai looked down at her phone and walked into the depths of the villa area alone. There was only a slightly smaller villa in the depths of the villa district. It had 2 floors and was less than 1,000 square meters. The location was slightly worse, and one could barely see a corner of the West Lake. However, there was a bamboo forest around it, so it looked extremely deep and quiet. This villa was also Qin Weibai's property. But it was written in the name of Great Master Wu Wei, so it could be regarded as Great Master Wu Wei's legacy. The morning wind blew through the bamboo forest. The bamboo leaves shook and made a slight sound. It was verdant and full of vitality. The villa was located in the middle of the bamboo forest, quiet because of the bamboo forest. The bamboo forest was rich because of the villa. They complemented each other. The exquisite door of the villa was unlocked. The smell of Chinese medicine wafted out of the villa. Qin Weibai walked into the villa. Flaming Fire, who was decocting medicine in the kitchen, looked back vigilantly at the first moment. When she saw Qin Weibai, she bowed slightly but did not come out. A middle-aged monk in gray sat in the living room. The monk wore a clean and simple gray robe, holding a string of Buddha beads in his hand, and his smile was peaceful and almost serene. There was a small box beside him. It was inconspicuous, but it was always within his reach. "Greetings, senior brother," Qin Weibai said softly. She sat down opposite the monk and straightened her back. The monk put his palms together and chuckled. Long time no see. Yes, long time no see. Qin Weibai looked at the string of Buddha beads in the monk's hand in a trance. After a long time, she asked, how did my foster father settle down? He didn't need to be settled down. The monk shook his head. My master voluntarily dissipated between heaven and earth. There was no mourning hall, no memorial tablet, and no cenotaph. Since we don't know where he came from, why bother to go there? My master never cared about what happened after his death. Qin Weibai didn't seem to know what to say, so she changed the subject. How about senior brother Rui? Great Master Wu Wei had 2 disciples when he was alive. One was Ruzhen, and the other was Rui. After Great Master Wu Wei disappeared, Ruzhen and Rui both left Qingyun Temple. If Qin Weibai hadn't contacted Ruzhen in advance, he wouldn't have come today. Not bad. Ruzhen smiled and said, he should be preaching on Mount Jingfan now. What about you? Qin Weibai looked at Ruzhen and asked, what's your plan? I want to keep walking. Let fate take its course. Ruzhen's smile remained unchanged. His eyes were calm, but his tone was polite and almost stiff. Qin Weibai seemed to have just noticed this. She sighed softly and said slowly, Senior brother, do you blame me? If it weren't for me, my foster father might not have. I don't blame you. Ruzhen interrupted Qin Weibai. That's my master's own choice. But you and I are not destined to be brothers and sisters. In this case, it's better to live separately. He handed the small box beside him to Qin Weibai and said softly, this belongs to you. My master gave it to me before he left. I've completed my task. We probably won't see each other again in this life. Qin Weibai looked at the quaint and old box. She knew what was in the box. She gave it to Great Master Wu Wei that year. Now 3 years later, it was back in her hands. Qin Weibai didn't touch the box. Instead, she bowed to Ruzhen and said, thank you, senior brother. Ruzhen shook his head and took off the Buddha beads on his wrist. The Buddha beads were extremely light, and each bead was crystal clear and round. Ruzhen gently dismantled the Buddha beads, took off the most crystal Buddha bead, and put it on the tea table. The Buddha bead rolled along the tea table and fell into Qin Weibai's hand. The light was on in the hall. The light shone on the Buddha bead. It was dark with a luster, like black jade. Qin Weibai was a little confused. This bead is called death substitution. Ruzhen said calmly, this is the Buddha's relic burned by the Grand Master after his death. It has been kept by my master for many years. Before I went to Heaven Capital, my master gave it to me. If you're lucky enough to go to Snow Country this time, you may survive. Qin Weibai was not excited. She just stared at the Buddha beads in her hand and whispered, death substitution. Death substitution. Someone had to do it for him. Ruzhen was silent. There was one thing he didn't say. If it weren't for this Buddha bead, Great Master Wu Wei might have been able to survive when he touched the dragon vein root of Mount Qingyun in Lonely Mountain. Death substitution. Someone had to do it for him. Great Master Wu Wei said it was destiny. It was destiny that chose him. Ruzhen didn't think it was right. Rather than calling it destiny, it would be more accurate to call it friendship. Survive and do what you want. That's what my master wants to see. Ruzhen looked at Qin Weibai and asked, if you can live, what do you want to do most? The question was too simple. It was so simple that Ruzhen knew the answer. If this woman, who poured everything into Li Tianlan, could live, she would naturally want to spend the rest of her life with Li Tianlan. But Qin Weibai's eyes were a little confused. She clenched the Buddha bead in her white and tender hand. She was silent for a long time before she whispered, I don't know. When she said this, her eyes were blank. There was no affection, no coldness, no wisdom, only blankness. After Snow Country, if she could live, she really didn't know what to do. You don't know? Ruzhen raised his eyebrows in surprise. I thought you would choose to live with Li Tianlan until your hair turns white. Until my hair turns white? Qin Weibai laughed self-deprecatingly. Her red lips gradually lost their color, making her look poignant and beautiful. Do I deserve it? She asked seriously. Ruzhen didn't know why Qin Weibai didn't deserve it. Since he didn't know, he naturally couldn't answer. He frowned, thought for a while, and then said blandly, you don't owe him anything. Owing is owing. That's the truth. It's too hard to say it doesn't exist. Qin Weibai shook her head. Ruzhen suddenly remembered a sentence that Great Master Wu Wei had said. He had said this to military counselor before Great Master Wu Wei disappeared. And earlier than that, he had said it to Ruzhen. Ruzhen glanced at her and said slowly, you are not you, and he is not him. How can I owe him? Qin Weibai shook her head and didn't speak. If there is really any debt, then pay it back. There is nothing that can't be paid back. Ruzhen said. How? Qin Weibai's voice was very soft, and she asked with some despair. Give him a child. This is the greatest sacrifice. Give him a descendant. Is there anything else that can't be paid back? Ruzhen lowered his head and tied the string of Buddha beads again, saying, you are not a monk. It's your duty to give birth to children. Master has even named you and his child. Whether it's a boy or a girl, it will be called Li Dongsheng. Qin Weibai didn't respond. Ruzhen raised his head, feeling strange. In his sight was a delicate and perfect face, but it seemed to have lost all color and spirit in an instant. Qin Weibai's face was pale. There was even some fear in her eyes. It was a scene after all the beauty was broken. It was beautiful, but not beautiful. What's wrong? Ruzhen asked. Qin Weibai shook her head reluctantly. Her voice was very reluctant and labored. I won't give him a child. Never. She loved Li Tianlan. But she had her own obsession. Never. Ruzhen still wanted to ask something, but Qin Weibai had already stood up and said calmly, Senior brother, I won't keep you. Help yourself. Ruzhen looked at her in surprise, nodded, and said, well, I'm leaving. Flaming fire. Qin Weibai shouted, see the guest out. Flaming fire came out of the kitchen and saw Ruzhen off. Qin Weibai sat down again and stared blankly at the small box in front of her. Fear once again surfaced in her cold and resplendent eyes. After Snow Country, if she didn't die, she really didn't know what to do. Because she couldn't see her future clearly, and she couldn't see Li Tianlan's future. She didn't know whether she and Li Tianlan would become husband and wife or enemies in the future if she lived, if she turned deep love into hatred. She would rather die. Death was really good. Qin Weibai took a few deep breaths, picked up the small box on the table, and got up to go upstairs. The door of the master bedroom was ajar. An extremely weak cough sounded in the bedroom. Qin Weibai pushed the door open and walked in. In the bedroom full of the smell of blood, a man in plain clothes was lying on the bed. The man looked about 37 or 38 years old, with short hair and a very attractive short beard on his chin. His appearance was not handsome, but it was extremely sharp. As sharp as a sword. In addition to the smell of blood, there was only sword intent in the air. A black cloak stained with blood hung on a hanger in the corner of the room, becoming the source of the smell of blood. How did you get hurt so badly? Qin Weibai glanced at the man and frowned. The man smiled bitterly. Summer solstice is stronger than all of us thought. She almost killed the men of sacrifice from the purgatory of heaven capital with one sword strike. The four of us fought against her sword strike, and it was her sword strike with lowered sword intent. I was a little better, but Duke and General were almost disabled, and military counselor was not much better than me. If I had been one step later. The man was Saint. The four super masters of Samsara escaped from the Wang family of Beihai overnight. Saint did not go to where he should go, but came to Lin and as soon as possible. Okay. Qin Weibai was silent for a while and said flatly. Saint had a bitter smile on his face. It's good to be alive. And if you have nothing to do, maybe you will go to Snow Country to seek death. That's good. Qin Weibai said softly, I want to go, and I don't need any formal send-off. Saint's mouth moved, and he wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Qin Weibai handed the box in her hand to Saint. This is what you want. After I leave, do what you should do. Recuperate here, and then go back. Saint took the box silently. He also knew what was in the box. He opened the box. There was a small but extremely heavy diary in the box. On the front of this diary was his road to the Invincible Realm. And on the back was the road to domination of the East Emperor Palace in the future. Qin Weibai was really ready for everything. He closed the book and suddenly whispered, I have a question. Go ahead. Qin Weibai said flatly. Why did you attack summer solstice? Saint looked at Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai also looked at him and did not speak. This question did not need to be answered. Why did she attack summer solstice? She had made it very clear before. And even if she did not say it, Saint could know. She had had this conversation with Saint many times. Every time Saint asked these questions that did not need to be answered, he actually did not care about the answer to the question. Instead, he wanted to use this question to say something. You are very similar to summer solstice. Saint said softly, you are the kind of lunatics who would do anything for your man. You are too similar. People like you can be very harmless, but they can also be very scary. In different times, you are unique. Such a woman should be respected, and no one will be willing to blame you. Qin Weibai looked at Saint. A trace of anger gradually appeared in her cold eyes. I am very similar to summer solstice. She said in a mocking tone, are you mocking me? Summer solstice was indeed worthy of respect. But, at least in my heart, my boss, Qin Weibai, is a woman who is qualified to be compared with summer solstice. Saint said seriously. That's only in your eyes. Qin Weibai said, in fact, I am not qualified. I can't compare with her. Saint was silent for a moment, and then said with a bitter smile, actually, I just heard your conversation. Qin Weibai's eyes narrowed. Saint was a little helpless. Although I am seriously injured, my ears are still good. I think Ruzhen is right. You don't owe Tianlan anything. Even if you owe him, he may not care. You don't understand. Qin Weibai shook her head. There's nothing I don't understand. Saint sneered and said, Little Bai, you weren't like this before. At least, you didn't think so when Tianlan appeared. You care too much about Tianlan's evaluation of you. If I have to say, if you didn't go to Heaven Capital 3 years ago and let us do everything, things wouldn't have come to this. You really shouldn't go to Heaven Capital. What else can I do if I don't go to Heaven Capital? Qin Weibai's expression was calm. If you didn't go to Heaven Capital, your thoughts wouldn't be so extreme. Saint said, it's good to be calm. Calm. Qin Weibai turned around and walked to the bedroom door. How can I be calm if my heart is not calm? She walked out of the bedroom, left the bamboo forest, and returned to the villa where Li Tianlan was. In the villa, Li Tianlan had already gotten up. Lin Fengting, his son, and Li Honghe had also gotten up. Li Honghe sat on the sofa and looked at Qin Weibai coming in. He smiled and nodded. Breakfast will be delivered soon. Qin Weibai said with a smile. I'm afraid I can't have breakfast. I just talked to Minister Dongqing on the phone. They should be here soon. Li Honghe said with a smile. With Li Honghe's status, if he was attacked and died, a funeral ceremony of the highest standard should be held. Now that he was injured but not dead, the people of the Six should send people to visit him. It doesn't matter. Breakfast is enough. Qin Weibai smiled. The roar of the helicopter's rotors sounded in the sky outside the villa. The sound came from far away and finally flew over the sky to the tarmac in the center of the villa area. Almost at the same time, a black Mercedes-Benz drove into the villa area and appeared in front of Qin Weibai's villa. A calm man in his 30s got out of the Mercedes-Benz. The door of the villa was not closed. He hesitated, walked into the courtyard, and rang the doorbell. Everyone in the villa suddenly focused their attention on him. "Seniorly, I'm Wang Jingxin." The young man introduced himself in a calm tone. Wang Jingxin from the Wang family of Beihai, the first secretary of Lin An. Everyone looked at him quietly. The expression of this upstart, who had long been famous in the political circle of Zhongzhou state, was still calm, but there was a trace of anxiety in his eyes at this time. His name was Jingxin. But how could he calm down for everything? In the mortal world, except for the experts who really saw through the world, everyone was a striver. Striving was also a pursuit. Chapter 335. Wang Jingxin stood at the door. The anxiety in his eyes was so clear that everyone could see it clearly. This young high-ranking official, who was likely to become the leader of the Southeast Group and even the flag figure in 20 years, was tall and straight. His appearance could only be said to be ordinary, but his eyebrows were extremely thick, which made him look very powerful. Now he stood there quietly. Although he was a little anxious, he still had a kind of dignified official authority and calmness. "Secretary Wang? What a rare visitor." Li Honghe smiled but did not get up. He just said slowly, "Please come in." Wang Jingxin came in. He came to Li Honghe and bowed deeply. "Hello, seniorly, I'm not very good." Li Honghe looked at Wang Jingxin. His voice was soft, but the content was very direct. Wang Jingxin's body, which had just straightened up, suddenly froze. He glanced at Li Honghe. Li Honghe was also looking at him. His eyes were deep and peaceful. Wang Jingxin could only see calmness. Wang Jingxin did not expect Li Honghe to be so direct. He did not expect Li Honghe to be so calm. At this moment, he even had a very absurd idea in his heart. Zhongzhou Sword Emperor, who ranked first on the divine list. State Protecting War God, who ranked fifth on the divine list. The two of them attacked an old man together. Not only did they fail, but the other party could still sit here calmly. What on earth did they do? Did they come to drink and chat? "I heard that Seniorly was attacked last night," Wang Jingxin said, but he did not finish. Li Honghe directly interrupted him and asked with a smile, "Jingxin, are you disappointed to see me like this?" Wang Jingxin's heart skipped a beat, but his powerful face did not change at all. He just said softly, "Seniorly is the pillar of Zhongzhou state. You work hard and make great contributions. Your health is very important to Zhongzhou state. I am relieved to see you are fine." He said it very sincerely, and everyone could even hear a trace of relief in his tone. Lin Fengting, who was sitting next to Li Honghe, smiled, shook his head, stood up, and said, "I'll go out for a walk with Yu Xian." He was impatient to get involved in these things. Behind such sincere relief, there were all conspiracies. There was no real sincerity under the hypocritical appearance, only insidiousness. This kind of life was too tiring. Li Honghe looked at Lin Fengting's back. There was some disappointment in his eyes. Lin Fengting's departure was not only because of his personality, but also because of his stance. He would protect the Li family. But the Lin clan still did not want to enter the secular world and participate in the disputes of Zhongzhou state. The Lin clan was outside of Zhongzhou, and Lin Fengting was like a wild crane, he had no pursuits. Therefore, his heart was the calmest. If he wanted to protect someone, he didn't need to gamble, because there was nothing that he wanted to gain. Therefore, one strike was enough. Li Honghe turned his eyes to Wang Jingxin. Other than Li Tianlan, there was only Qin Weibai in the hall. Therefore, He spoke more directly. So, Jing Xian, you're not disappointed? Wang Jingxin seemed to have completely relaxed. He was not interested in martial arts, but in terms of scheming and shrewdness, he was not inferior to anyone. In such a situation, he naturally knew what kind of attitude to use. I'm not disappointed. He said, I'm just a little worried. Worried? Li Honghe raised his eyebrows. For myself. Wang Jingxin's gaze was frank and calm. He was completely telling the truth. He had thought that he would see a seriously injured and dying Li Honghe today, but he did not expect to see a calm veteran of Zhongzhou state as if nothing had happened. The better Li Honghe was, the more trouble the Wang family of Beihai would have. Li Honghe, who did not seem to be seriously injured, was completely worthy of some forces increasing their support for the Li family. Wang Jingxin knew the internal meeting held by the giant group last night. He even knew some of the contents of the meeting. The Dongxing clan did not know that Wang Tianzong actually did not make any arrangements when he left Linpen. The old man of the Lu family suggested that Dongxing Rushi should marry Wang Jingxin, which was Wang Jingxin's own proposal. But Dongxing Wudi refused this arrangement. This refusal was tantamount to showing his attitude of supporting the Li family. If he supported the Li family, he would definitely make the Wang family of Beihai pay the price. Li Honghe was attacked in Linpen. With his identity, if the higher-ups really investigated, as the top leader of Linpen, Wang Jingxin was undoubtedly responsible. The giant group supported the Li family and wanted to make the Wang family of Beihai pay something. Wang Jingxin was the best and most obvious breakthrough. In the Wang family of Beihai, Wang Jingxin's branch was not too powerful, but he himself was very valued by Wang Tianzong. Even if he was the person in charge, there would not be too fatal consequences. At worst, he would leave Linpen and Jiangzhe. Wang Jingxin did not want to leave. He had been working in Linpen for nearly 6 years. If he was forced to leave the base that he had operated for many years because of this matter, even if he would get a position in another place that was no less than his current position, the actual loss was still unimaginable. This was the purpose of his visit today. He did not expect himself to change the Li family's attitude toward him. But at least he had to try something. At present, not leaving Linpen was his bottom line. As for the rest, he had enough psychological preparation. Your concern is very reasonable. Li Honghe looked at Wang Jingxin gently, and his tone was almost unacceptable. He was very direct. Wang Jingxin was even more direct. He did not answer Li Honghe's words, but turned directly to look at Li Tianlan. Hello. He took the initiative to reach out his hand. Hello. Li Tianlan reached out and shook hands with him without batting an eyelid. What do you need me to do for you in Linpen? Wang Jingxin asked directly. This was not a surrender, but a deal. He was the core young power of the Wang family of Beihai, and there was no possibility of changing his position. But this did not mean that he could not make a deal with the Li family. Even if they were enemies, there was the possibility of a deal. And if he could stay in Linpen, this was also a situation that Wang Tianzong would like to see. The roar of the helicopter outside the window sounded again. Another helicopter flew over from above. Wang Jingxin still looked at Li Tianlan, and his eyes quietly became dignified. I'll entertain Secretary Wang, Qin Weibai said at the right time with a perfect smile. Qin Weibai said with a perfect smile, Tianlan, you can stay here. Marshal Dongsheng is coming. Maybe he will bring some unexpected gifts. What gifts? Li Honghe laughed and whispered, it's just an old military uniform. Wang Jingxin's pupils suddenly contracted as if he was pricked by a needle. An old military uniform. But that was Li Honghe's military uniform. Li Honghe glanced at Li Tianlan. You guys go together. He said, I can entertain the distinguished guests by myself. Li Tianlan thought for a moment and nodded. Secretary Wang, please. He pointed upstairs. There was a more private small living room upstairs. Wang Jingxin followed Li Tianlan and walked over. Qin Weibai glanced at Li Honghe before she stepped forward. From an angle that Li Tianlan could not see, her eyes were cold and full of disgust. Li Honghe looked at Qin Weibai's eyes calmly and kept his smile. Qin Weibai narrowed her eyes, took a deep breath, and turned to follow Li Tianlan. The third helicopter flew over. Li Honghe stood up and walked to the door. It was a short distance from the living room to the door. The morning wind blew into the villa through the door, with the smell of West Lake, and it was cool. The turbidity in Li Honghe's eyes began to fade and become clear. He was the only one left in the hall. He didn't need to hide anything. He straightened up in cotton clothes, and there was a brilliant light in his eyes. 3 men who looked only middle-aged appeared in Li Honghe's sight with their backs to the morning sun. Dongxing Wudi, the executive minister of the army headquarters and a member of the decision-making committee of Zhongzhou State, walked in the middle. On his left and right sides were figures that Li Honghe was very familiar with. The 3 men looked solemn. They walked into the courtyard and came to the door. Li Honghe stood there quietly, his eyes deep and calm. The 3 men subconsciously wanted to bow. Li Honghe waved his hand with a smile and said, "Let's go in and talk. Listen to Uncle Li." Dongxing Wudi smiled. He stood at the door in a neat military uniform. The golden marshal rank shone dazzlingly in the morning light, looking majestic. Li Honghe turned and walked into the living room. He sat down again where he had just been sitting. "What about the other one?" Li Honghe asked. "He's in the back. As the rumors say, he and Ziyuan don't get along well. It's better to separate." The middle-aged man on the left of Dongxing Wudi said with a smile. At first glance, he looked very young and energetic, but in fact, he was slightly old. The wrinkles at the corners of his eyes were very dense, and his hair was dyed black with hair dye. Among the 3, he was the oldest, so he seemed to be the most relaxed in front of Li Honghe. "Jingmin, you're in good spirits. Can you work for another term?" Li Honghe looked at him and asked with a smile. "Another term? It's hard. Not to mention Zhongzhou State, even this guy probably won't let me work for another term. I'm just holding a position now to pave the way for his good son-in-law." The middle-aged man named Jingmin pointed to Dongxing Wudi with a smile. Dongxing Wudi smiled and said nothing. Wu Jingmin. In Jiangxia province of Zhongzhou State, this was definitely a well-known name. Even in the political circle of the whole Zhongzhou State, this name could be said to be a legend. In recent decades, he was the only powerful figure who had served as the leader of the same province for more than 15 years. The core force of the southeast faction, Wu Jingmin, the leader of Jiangxia province. He had never entered the decision-making committee in his life, but in Jiangxia, his foundation was unimaginably deep. Even the highest-level directors had to think about what he said seriously. Wu Jingmin was 69 years old this year. He should have retired 2 years ago, or even 5 years ago, but he always sat in the position of the leader of Jiangxia without moving. With his ability and prestige, as long as his health allowed, no one would doubt that he could not continue to work for another term, which was enough for him to hold the highest power in Jiangxia for 20 years. "It's the Li family that let you down." Li Honghe looked at Wu Jingmin with soft eyes. "Your Highness, it's boring to say this. I've been fine these years." Wu Jingmin stopped smiling and looked at Li Honghe seriously. Dongxing Wudi was Li Honghe's junior. Ning Ziyuan, the commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations on the right of Dongxing Wudi, was also Li Honghe's junior. But Wu Jingmin, who was 69 years old this year, was Li Honghe's friend. Li Honghe was a little older than Wu Jingmin. At the peak of the Li family, Wu Jingmin could be said to be the talent that Li Honghe valued most. Among the core members of the Li family, his rank might not be the highest, but he was recognized as one of the political forces that could best represent Li Honghe's will. If the Li family had not collapsed, Wu Jingmin's journey would never have stopped in Jiangxia. Now, at least he would have entered the cabinet. Even if he could not get the principal position, he would at least be the first deputy prime minister of the cabinet. However, with the collapse of the Li family, Wu Jingmin's rank had never changed. He became the ruler of a province from the governor, but his political life had come to an end. Although he had been silent all these years after the collapse of the Li family, it was the same even after he reappeared. But he had never won the real trust of the Wang family of Beihai and the full support of the Southeast Group. Wu Jingmin said that he had been fine these years. How could he be fine? Li Honghe took a deep look at him, turned his head, and looked at Ning Ziyuan, who was silent. This general of Zhongzhou state, who was also promoted by him, had a completely different experience from Wu Jingmin. Wu Jingmin, who had been silent and never said anything for the Li family, had never won the real trust of the Wang family of Beihai. But in the past many years, Ning Ziyuan, who had been speaking for the Li family, was deeply trusted by Wang Tianzong. But in recent years, Wang Tianzong's attitude toward him had changed subtly. Ning Ziyuan had an ordinary appearance, low-key and silent. Noticing Li Honghe's gaze, he seemed to be a little excited and subconsciously bowed. Ziyuan, Qianqing is good. I heard from Dong Lai that Qianqing is in love with Dong Lai's granddaughter. Very good. Some feelings can't change with time. In this way, you and Dong Lai will be closer. Li Honghe said with a smile. It's all the children's business. I didn't intervene, but I'm very supportive of this matter. Ning Ziyuan said respectfully. Li Honghe said yes, hesitated, and asked, how has Migres been these years? Qianqing has had a stiff relationship with you these years. Is it because of Migres's daughter? His eyes were a little sad. Dongqing Wudi was puzzled. Not to mention him, even Wu Jingmin, who had never spoken for the Li family but was definitely on their side, was a little puzzled. He didn't know who this so-called Migres was. He could only vaguely guess that it was a code name. Migres is very good. Ning Ziyuan said softly, he has a strong force in his hands now. He has been preparing for these years. As long as there is a need, he will do his best to help Tianlan. You've worked hard. Li Honghe suddenly didn't know what to say. He was silent for a long time, and then he said these three words dryly. The collapse of the Li family was so fierce and rapid that even Li Honghe couldn't leave too many flawless backups. Wu Jingmin was one of them, and there were others. But among all the backups, the most flawless one was a group of hidden forces with only 7 people. That was the core hidden force belonging to the Li family, codenamed Starry Sky. They used the Big Dipper as their code name. Ning Ziyuan ranked last, codenamed Alcade. After more than 20 years, 6 of the 7 people were still alive. Only Tianji was dead. He died in Heaven Capital. Thank him for me. Li Honghe said softly, his identity is special. I'm afraid it will be difficult for me to see him again. I will tell Tianlan that when he returns to the Li family, no one will say that he is a servant of 3 families. He is a hero of the Li family, and you are all heroes of the Li family. Ning Ziyuan wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Finally, he nodded silently. The sound of light footsteps could be heard. A man in his 40s came in from the door of the villa. The man was tall and burly. He was dressed in casual clothes, but his body was as straight as a sword, looking majestic. He looked domineering and wild. He had a striking bald head, solemnly holding a box in his hands, and walked slowly into the living room. Seniorly, he walked up to Li Honghe, put down the box, and said in a respectful tone, "Sit down." Li Honghe nodded with a smile. The bald man sat down beside Ning Ziyuan. There was no expression on his majestic face. He didn't even look at Ning Ziyuan. I say, it's okay for you to pretend in normal days. Now we're all on the same side. Why are you still so tense? It's as if you really have a deep hatred for Ziyuan. Wu Jingmin suddenly scolded with a smile. The bald man was stunned, and then he shook his head with a wry smile. It's a deep hatred. Until now, my sister-in-law still thinks that my brother-in-law is a pervert. It's this bastard who told his sister that I liked him. After so many years, this misunderstanding is so big. Ning Ziyuan's sister was Ning Sini. Ning Sini was the daughter-in-law of the Zhang family, a wealthy family in Huading. Her brother-in-law was naturally also surnamed Zhang. Zhang Qi, the minister of the Southeast Special Warfare Headquarters of Zhongzhou State. Zhang Qi liked Ning Sini, but Ning Ziyuan married his sister to Zhang Qi's brother, Zhang Xiaohua. This matter caused a great uproar in the southeast at that time. Zhang Qi also completely fell out with his family and Ning Ziyuan. This matter was still brought up to this day. At that time, the Wang family of Beihai appointed Zhang Qi as the minister of the Southeast Special Warfare Headquarters in order to check and balance Ning Ziyuan's expansion in the Eastern Theater of Operations, which was gradually alienated from them. For more than 20 years, Zhang Qi and Ning Ziyuan rarely met each other. The relationship they showed was almost incompatible with each other. They just managed to deal with each other in public. Today's gathering was also a public place in the eyes of outsiders. Li Honghe was assassinated in Lin'an. Wu Jingmin, the host. Ning Ziyuan, the commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations in charge of the defense of the southeast of Zhongzhou State. Zhang Qi, the minister of the Southeast Special Warfare Headquarters. Dongqing Wudi, the actual number one person in the military today. Their identities gave them all a reason to show up here to visit Li Honghe. As for the actual scene of this visit, who would have thought that it would be so harmonious? Li Honghe smiled and waved his hand. He knew that Zhang Qi was joking, so he didn't bother to say more. He looked at the box that Zhang Qi brought over. The box had been opened. Inside was a military uniform. The military uniform was old, but the old color seemed to be stained with the breath and glory of endless blood and fire. The old-fashioned martial rank of Zhongzhou State was worn on the military uniform, shining with golden light. This was the military uniform that belonged to Li Honghe back then. Everyone's eyes were focused on this military uniform. When will the meeting begin? Li Honghe asked softly. 1:00 in the afternoon. Dongqing Wudi said. Li Honghe was attacked. This was a big deal. The decision-making committee had already announced the meeting time last night. Li Honghe gently reached out his hand. He put his hand on the military uniform with a nostalgic look on his face. Li Honghe's voice sounded in the silent living room, resolute and without hesitation. I'm going to change, he said. The eyes of Dongqing Wudi, Wu Jingmin, Zhang Qi, and Ning Ziyuan burst into a sharp light at the same time. The four of them stood up at the same time, bent down, and bowed deeply. A clear and steady voice swept through the living room in an instant, tough and surging. Welcome back to Yuzhou, Your Highness. After more than 20 years. Back to Yuzhou. Li Honghe touched the marshal's epaulet on the military uniform with his fingers and turned his head to the north. In the north was West Lake. The water on West Lake turned and rippled suddenly. The wind came from the south and blew to the north, getting faster and faster, as if it would never stop. Chapter 336. From early morning to dusk. Wang Jingxin talked with Li Tianlan for a long time. There was a balcony with an excellent view in the small living room of the villa. Li Tianlan saw his grandfather boarded the helicopter surrounded by Dongqing Wudi and others. The quaint and old general uniform was dignified and dazzling, like the only remaining afterglow of the Li family. He felt the sudden gust of wind in Lin'an. The green leaves were swept high into the sky in the wind, and the whole lake was turbulent in the wind. After the gust, Li Tianlan didn't know what would happen to the Li family. Just like now, no one knew the result of Li Honghe's return to Yuzhou. The wind outside was howling all over the sky. The summer wind was equally hot. But sitting in the villa, Li Tianlan suddenly felt a little cold. Looking at Wang Jingxin in front of him and listening to his conditions one after another. It was not until now that Li Tianlan really felt the part of the general trend and wind and rain related to himself and the Li family. It was completely different from 3 years ago. The decisive battle in Heaven Capital 3 years ago was the general trend of the dark world. Zhongzhou State's gains and losses were related to Li Tianlan, but it was not closely related to him. And this time, the Li family was completely standing in the center of the storm. Li Honghe, who had left Yuzhou for many years, returned to Yuzhou. What would he get? This matter was related to Zhongzhou State, but it was also not closely related to him. It was just the gains and losses of the Li family. How much the Li family got from this matter could completely affect Li Tianlan's future advance and retreat. Compared with that, the negotiation with Wang Jingxin was completely insignificant. Therefore, Li Tianlan spoke very little the whole afternoon. He was cautious in his wording, but his mind had already flown with Li Honghe to the plenary meeting of the decision-making committee in Yuzhou. Qin Weibai had been accompanying Li Tianlan. In this small, private living room, even flaming fire did not come up to the table. Qin Weibai was both a waiter and a representative of Li Tianlan. She made tea herself and then negotiated with Wang Jingxin according to Li Tianlan's intention. In the afternoon, Qin Weibai made more than 20 requests to Wang Jingxin. The requests were big and small. The big ones were extremely big. The small ones were very small, and all of them were details. Qin Weibai seemed to really attach great importance to this negotiation, so her attitude was extremely serious. Li Tianlan was silent most of the time. He thought of the meeting in Yuzhou and listened to the negotiation between Qin Weibai and Wang Jingxin. In his previous world, there was only martial arts. Politics, tactics, the general trend, to him, all of this was still very unfamiliar to him. Martial arts did not represent everything. So now Li Tianlan had begun to consciously learn these things. Fortunately, there was no shortage of such teachers around him. Both his grandfather, Li Honghe, and his wife, Qin Weibai, were excellent in this aspect. Dusk gradually passed. The sun was setting. The night shrouded Lin. The wind outside the window became a gentle breeze again. After talking with Qin Weibai for the whole afternoon, Wang Jingxin agreed to most of Qin Weibai's conditions. After exchanging contact information with Li Tianlan, she took her leave without hesitation. Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai walked him out of the villa and watched his black Mercedes-Benz leave the villa area. The red taillights were getting farther and farther away in their sight. He left in a hurry. Li Tianlan said. Indeed, when Wang Jingxin left, he was still calm and indifferent, but the speed of the car revealed his actual mood. When he left, the speed of the car could be regarded as speeding in some parts of downtown Lin, not to mention the villa area. He was under a lot of pressure, and he talked a little more today. It's normal for him to rush back to sort out his thoughts and report to Wang Tianzong. Qin Weibai stood beside Li Tianlan and naturally took his arm. The light in the villa shone into the night with the open door. Qin Weibai's shadow was very long. Her long soft hair danced with the night breeze, looking tranquil and gentle. That's what I'm surprised about. Li Tianlan was silent for a while, then whispered, "Don't you think he compromised too much?" There were some things that he had not touched. Without contact, it was impossible to fully understand. So he used a tone of asking for advice. Qin Weibai almost spent the whole afternoon making requests. Although she was smiling, her attitude was extremely tough. For example, in the future, the development of the East Emperor Palace in Lin would get full support from Wang Jingxin. For example, Lin would rebuild Lonely Mountain. For example, Wang Jingxin would come forward to resist the pressure from the Southeast Special Warfare Headquarters to the East Emperor Palace in Lin. Li Tianlan really didn't understand politics. But he was not a fool. At least he knew that Qin Weibai was demanding an exorbitant price. If Wang Jingxin agreed to all of them, the treatment of the East Emperor Palace in Lin would even be no less than that of the young forces cultivated by the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Jingxin agreed to most of them. And the rest of them did not explicitly refuse, just saying that they were considering it. Was such a compromise just to not leave Lin? What surprised Li Tianlan most was Qin Weibai's attitude. Her attitude was really too serious. Looking at the series of requirements she put forward, even Li Tianlan himself felt that Qin Weibai wanted him to set the headquarters of the East Emperor Palace in Lin. The Li family would occupy Lonely Mountain. But the problem was that the future territory of the East Emperor Palace was Tiannan. This is just the beginning. Qin Weibai took Li Tianlan's arm and walked down the steps. Her whole body was almost attached to him, and she said softly, "In the future, our requirements will be more and more. It is difficult for Wang Jingxin to refuse our current requirements. Once he agrees to help us this time, he may make more compromises to us in the future. When he really doesn't want to entangle with us, we won't need him." She took Li Tianlan to West Lake, and her voice was soft and gentle. "Tianlan, it's hard for you to understand how important a base camp is to a politician, especially for Wang Jingxin. Unless it's really a last resort, he won't give up Lin. The Wang family of Beihai won't let him give up. Wang Jingxin has a promising future. If there is no accident in the future, he will definitely enter the decision-making committee. But in the end, whether he is a counselor or a director, and how he ranks, not only depends on his ambition and means, but also the necessary time, place, and people. If he is forced to leave Lin, and without preparation, it will be difficult for him to reach the end in the future. It's not as simple as changing a position at all." Qin Weibai's tone was indifferent and firm. This was almost not a speculation based on wisdom. It was a confirmation after understanding. "Why?" Li Tianlan asked. Qin Weibai obviously hesitated for a moment, and then said softly, "Because here is Jiangzhe." "So?" Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. He really didn't know much about the specific forces of the Li family before, but these were things that he had to get in touch with after all. The Li family and the Wang family of Beihai have always been very close. For hundreds of years, the two families have been controlling the southeast group at the same time. So before the collapse of the Li family, the lineal descendants of the two families were inseparable on many occasions. They were all on the same side. In many places, the lineal descendants of the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family were squeezed together and worked hand in hand. But there were also subtle differences. If you want to distinguish this slight difference, Jiangzhe can be said to be the strongest base camp of the Li family. Qin Weibai looked at Li Tianlan's quietly changing face and said softly, "Do you understand? Just like the Wang family of Beihai in Beihai province and Wuyue province, Jiangzhe used to be the strongest fortress of the Li family, and it was also the place where the Li family had the strongest power. Even if the Li family collapsed, the personnel adjustment here has not been big over the years. Wu Jingmin served as the first secretary of Jiangzhe for nearly 20 years, which is the most obvious example. He entered the Central Committee of Zhongzhou State 4 times in a row, once as the governor, and 3 times as the first secretary. I'm afraid even the Wang family of Beihai doesn't know how strong Wu Jingmin's foundation is in Jiangzhe. Qin Weibai said quietly, "This is one of the most developed provinces in Zhongzhou State. The Li family collapsed, but the southeast group is still there. So although Jiangzhe doesn't belong to the Li family, it still belongs to the southeast group. But in the end, this place belongs to Wu Jingmin. But in the end, Wu Jingmin is in the southeast group, so Jiangzhe is the back garden of the southeast group. Wu Jingmin is in the Li family, so this is the back garden of the Li family. He was the talent that Senior Li valued the most in those days. Over the years, he has never expressed any opinion on the collapse of the Li family, but he has always firmly guarded the last foundation of the Li family. Senior Li is very good at judging people. In this life, I'm afraid he only misjudged 2 people." Li Tianlan was so shocked that he couldn't speak at all. He thought that the Li family had long been desolate. He thought that the Li family had long been without foundation. But only when he arrived in Jiangzhe did he understand what was going on. Why didn't Wang Tianzong touch Wu Jingmin? Li Tianlan couldn't help asking. How could it be so easy? Qin Weibai shook her head. The collapse of the Li family was too sudden. The Wang family of Beihai was unprepared, and it was extremely chaotic in the early days. It was not that Wang Tianzong didn't want to touch Wu Jingmin, but he couldn't. The Wang family of Beihai's inaction had already made many people dissatisfied. The Li family had just collapsed, and they were eager to deal with the person that seniorly valued the most. This was simply asking for trouble. After Wang Tianzong stabilized the situation, Wu Jingmin had become the top leader of Jiangxia and was deeply rooted. At that time, it was not good to act rashly. About 10 years ago, there was news inside the Southeast group that wanted Wu Jingmin to go further and transfer him out of Jiangxia, but he refused. So, Wang Jingxin came to Jiangxia. Li Tianlan was silent, but he had completely understood what Qin Weibai meant. Wang Jingxin came to Jiangxia and ran Lin, and with some kind of cleaning task. He rose step by step in Jiangxia. If there was no accident, with his identity as the top leader of the provincial capital, he could become the governor of Jiangxia in 2 years. Jiangxia was the foundation that Wu Jingmin took care of for the Li family. If Wang Jingxin succeeded in replacing Wu Jingmin, he could gradually turn the Li family's power into his own, so that he could almost completely eliminate the Li family's voice in the Southeast group. At that time, he could rely on this power to get the support of the Southeast group and embark on his own road to success. If he left Jiangxia, it was tantamount to his failure. Not to mention that the aura of a political strongman would be dim, other provinces might not have such opportunities. So, the whole of Jiangxia is actually still under the control of the Li family? Li Tianlan took a deep breath and asked, suppressing his inner amazement. What kind of future would it be with a province as the foundation? No. To be exact, it is under the control of Wu Jingmin, and only half of Jiangxia. Qin Weibai's tone was calm. And as time goes by, his influence in Jiangxia will slowly decline. Many people in Jiangxia have relations with the original Li family. Even if they are not his henchmen, at least they have been helped by the Li family. But people are realistic. Over the years, Wu Jingmin has been as stable as Mount Tai in Jiangxia, so these people can naturally stay put. But as he gets older, those people will definitely have other ideas. Qin Weibai looked at Li Tianlan softly. It's not easy for the Li family to take over Jiangxia again. Even if Wu Jingmin wants to hand over Jiangxia, it will be very difficult for you to take it over. It's not that you are not strong enough, but that they can't see hope. If one was not strong enough, there would naturally be no hope. This was actually the same thing. So this time Grandpa returned to Yuzhou, is it to fight for this hope? Li Tianlan asked. The two strolled in the West Lake, snuggling up to each other, like a couple in love. But what they discussed was the pattern of the entire Zhongzhou state and the survival of the Li family. This hope is the price that the Wang family of Beihai must pay this time. Qin Weibai said softly, I even suspect that this time Wang Tianzong and Gu Xingyan came to Lin, and together is an opportunity created by Senior Li quietly. Even if Lin Fengting doesn't come, Senior Li should be fine. He has been waiting for this opportunity. Now the opportunity is here. The Wang family of Beihai will not let Wang Jingxin, who shoulders the task of cleaning up the Li family, leave Lin then. But after this meeting, there is bound to be a person on your side who is no less qualified or skilled than Wang Jingxin to Jiangxia. The two people check and balance each other, so that those who are loyal to Wu Jingmin will continue to retain hope and tentatively approach you. A person who was strong enough to compete with Wang Jingxin. Li Tianlan thought of Zhou Yuanshan at the first time. Both of them were popular figures who were most likely to become giants in Zhongzhou state in the next 20 years. At present, the force in Jiangxia led by Wu Jingmin seemed to belong to the Southeast group, but in fact, it was outside the six. Whether it was Wang Jingxin or Zhou Yuanshan, whoever could get the support of this force would make their strength expand rapidly. This force, when the two competed fiercely, could even decide who would eventually go to the altar and become the leader of Zhongzhou state. Wu Jingmin was old, so those who came to Jiangxia after this meeting would become the new hope of those people. As for this meeting, Qin Weibai thought for a while and said slowly, "It's not that simple. At least Wu Jingmin's departure is uncertain. That's why I negotiated with Wang Jingxin. He agreed to our conditions. Together with the newcomer to Jiangxia, your strength in Jiangxia will be very strong. In the future, when you manage Tiannan on the surface, you can also secretly develop your own strength in Jiangxia." Li Tianlan looked at his watch. It was already 9:00 in the evening. The meeting of the decision-making committee that started at 1:00 in the afternoon had been held for 8 hours, and it was not over yet. What will be the result of this meeting? Li Tianlan asked in a low voice. I'm not sure. Qin Weibai shook her head. She took a deep look at Li Tianlan and said softly, I have a piece of top-secret information. Zhang Qi of the Southeast Special Warfare Headquarters of Huading is likely to be a hidden pawn left by Senior Li, with the support of the giant group, Wu Jingmin, Ning Ziyuan, Zhang Qi. Tianlan, don't you understand what this means? The support of the giant group. If the top leader of Jiangxia, the commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations, and the minister of the Southeast Special Warfare Headquarters were all the forces of the Li family, what did it mean? Li Tianlan's face suddenly changed. Senior Li's return to Yuzhou this time is entirely based on Jiangxia to plot the southeast. Qin Weibai said in a low voice. After more than 20 years of silence and low-key, the opportunity finally came. When the afterglow of the Li family was about to fade, Li Honghe had taken it for granted that the entire southeast of Zhongzhou state was his prey. Based on Jiangxia, plot the southeast, you're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.